So I want to start with a little bit of gratitude. First of all, gratitude for all of you here that made it today at 3 p.m. I'm grateful for the amazing energy in the space. It warms my heart when people arrive and they're automatically connecting with each other. I'm like, okay, I did my job. I did what I had to do. I'm super grateful to GMP and Sabis for providing us with this incredible space. So this is part of the global campus, okay? But now this area right here can be used for events, for co-working, for your offices. So if you're looking for an office, a new place to work, this could be a place right here. Talk to her. I'm really, really grateful for my amazing team. Some people here missing as well, but honestly, without them, none of this would be possible. I'm super grateful for Bioma, for giving us these amazing. Christopher, where are you, Christopher? Okay, he's probably cleaning things up, but if you see Christopher, guy with the shaved head, that's him. Tell him this is the best kombucha I've ever tried in my life. Okay? I'm super grateful for a lot of things. And here, come in. Everyone, round of applause, please. Woo! Anyone who arrives late, before we actually start with Peter Sage, let's give him a big round of applause, okay? I'm super grateful for Peter Sage with the amazing podcast we did here today, Esu, the whole team, everyone together. It's been an absolute amazing first half of the day, and the second half is only going to get better. And I'm also super grateful for Jake, who is going to make sure that we are here grounded, activated, and making sure that we, maintain this amazing energy. I met Jake around 3-4 years ago when he was starting Show Up. Who here knows Show Up? The morning meditations during sunrise every single Wednesday. If you haven't been there, go. And actually, this year, he just opened Ilo Studios. It's a new wellness social club here in Barcelona, super central in Plaza Tetuan. If you haven't been there, do yourself a favor and go there. We're going to share a link also with a discount so you can try it out. And before we actually introduce Peter Sage the amazing experience that's going to come, I would like to give the space to Jake.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Just a quick one. So today, what Mark didn't also mention was that I also have had a kid in the same year that I've tried to open a business and have another one at the same time. And today, I didn't get any sleep. So I'm going to change this from an activating to a little bit more of a calming, if that's okay with you. Right? So Peter, if you want, you take a seat as well. Come and sit. All right, everyone sit up nice and straight. Put your feet on the floor. You can wiggle your bum around a little bit. Let's get a bit more comfortable. Good. And slow it down. Close the eyes. Good. I just want you to be able to notice just a couple of things on your body before we get started. Maybe just noticing where your chest is, where your shoulders are. Maybe just noticing that slight curvature that's in your spine at the moment. Maybe noticing if you can lengthen your spine a little bit more, imagining that the head is coming slightly higher towards the roof. As you extend the spine, I want you to take a nice and slow breath in through the nose together. Breathing in. Hold the breath at the top for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let that breath go. Good. We're going to do the same thing again. Breathing in through the nose. Hold the breath at the top for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let that breath go. We're going to take a breath in for 6 seconds, nice and slow. Breathing in. 4, 5, 6. Hold the breath for 3, 2, 1. Let that breath go for 4, 3, 2, 1. Fast breath in through the nose. Hold at the top. Take another sip of air in through the nose. Hold for 5, 4, 3, 2, One long exhale. Allow a slow breath in and out through the nose. On this next breath in, I want you to rise your shoulders towards your ears. Squeeze the shoulders up towards the ears. Take a breath in. And as you exhale, let all that stress fall out as the shoulders fall down. Take a breath in through the nose. Shoulders come up. And let go. Last one. In, shoulders come up. Letting go as the shoulders fall down. Rise the hands all the way to the roof. Interlock the fingers. Reach up towards the sky. Take a full breath in through the nose. Let the breath go. Keep the hands up. Loosen the shoulders a little bit. Breathe in. Reach the hands up towards the sky. Reaching. Letting the breath go. Hands come down. Take a slow breath in through the nose. Out through the nose. Fast breath in through the mouth. Letting go. All the way in. Letting go. Big breath in. Letting go of the breath, hands come down. Keep the eyes closed, standing up. Come up to your feet. Come all the way up. Good, we're going to get that footsteps back in. Everyone just start to walk on the spot. Maybe making a little bit more noise. Let's go. Take a breath in through the nose. Emptying all the air out of your mouth. Hold the breath, keep walking. Empty the air out of your lungs. Hold the breath with no air in the lungs. Keep walking. 3, 2, 1. Stop. Take a slow breath in through the nose. Out through the nose. Take a breath in. Out through the nose. Holding the breath, no air in the lungs. Start walking a little bit faster. Go, 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 go. A little bit faster. A little bit faster. 3, 2, 1. Stop. Breathe through the nose. Let go of that air. Big breath in through the nose. Breathing out that air. Hold the breath. Start running on the spot. Quicker. Nice and fast. Last round. Faster, faster, faster. Faster, faster, faster. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Stop. Breathe in slowly. Hold the breath at the top. Hold. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let go. One slow breath in through the nose. Letting that breath go. Just allowing a couple of slow breaths to fall in and out of the nose. Maybe just becoming aware of how you feel, how the sensations of your body are, if you're feeling a little bit more grounded, a bit more connected to your bodies. There's a little bit less chatter in the minds. Just have one more deep breath in at your own pace. Hopefully feeling a bit more open, a bit more connected and aware to receive some of the knowledge and wisdom that is about to come your way. Take one more breath in to collectively together and a loud exhale. And I'll hand it over to Peter.
First, maybe
Okay.
introduce Peter in. I think you can all sit down.
Okay.
You don't need to stand up for me. Okay. So, personally, this is an important moment for me because introducing Peter to Karisma means a lot for me with my personal journey. About 2 years ago, I think, I was exposed. I was on a train ride from Madrid to Barcelona speaking to my sister who's here. And she told me first time I heard this name and I saw a video and it evolved and evolved. And I think that the most important thing is that most people in this room, they know what Karisma stands for. And we are far more than just a founders community or an ecosystem to succeed more in business. It's the success of life. It's the definition of success. It's enjoying the journey. It's acting out of something which is meaningful and can keep you motivated in the dark days and can keep you shining in the good days. And one of the beautiful things that I've personally learned, which brings me this pleasure to introduce Peter to our community, is that sometimes we can talk and we can do, but it's all about zooming out and asking the right questions and focusing on things that we just don't find the time to because we are too busy being founders. So I'm hoping that this will have an impact and open the eyes of some of us, and I'm sure that it would be fascinating. I'd like to introduce Peter, who is, I don't know how to introduce you as a founder, as a speaker, as an international motivator, but first of all, I'd say a very meaningful human with what you're doing and the message that you're trying to give to others. So really happy and proud to have you here and looking forward to sharing your insights with everybody here. Welcome.
Thank you. Wow, what a real pleasure. One of the perks, I guess, is being whatever he said I was, as I get to go around and speak to different audiences and be on different stages around the world. So I get to share some of the message I want to bring today with different groups of people. And one of the most passionate groups that I love to spend time with are not just entrepreneurs or founders, which is something that I've identified as since I was 17. And really, I've had peer groups in the past that have been very entrepreneurial focused, but they've been entrepreneurially focused in a way that really doesn't sit on a foundation of meaning. And so when I was invited to come speak to the Karisma Club, and I looked into more about how you guys came about, the criteria for how you're chosen to be part of this club and the reasons why you want to be here, it really touched my heart because I get to speak to what I guess is my favorite audience, which is founders, entrepreneurs, crazies, mavericks, we know who we are, but also that sat on a foundation of what I would call higher consciousness. Something that's more than just about the significance or the money or trying to prove to the world that we're good enough or all of that kind of stuff. Don't get me wrong, it's a journey most of us have to go through to realize that it's not the journey we want. But to be able to come and speak to a room today that of people that are at that kind of level or open to learning more about what that looks like is something I'm very humbled by and very passionate to be able to share. So thank you for allowing me the privilege of being able to come and address and share some of my things. Now, a little bit about me. I don't want today to be about me at all. I don't care if you remember my name, know my name, ever see me again. That's not the purpose of me being here. The purpose is not to make it about me or what I've done or what I'm going to share. The purpose for today is for you guys to be open-minded enough to be able to take something out of what I say and hopefully make a change, make a shift, make a difference in your lives as you move forward. Now, you may disagree with some of the things I'm going to share with you today. That's fine. That's what makes things happen. But I can promise you that I went after this journey and I secured a lot of the insight through a lot of the mistakes that I've made that I want to bring to the table and share with a passion. And it was a passion driven by a very simple but profound question. And that is, why is it that so many people in a world of abundance, in a world of opportunity, why is it so many people fail to get the bat off their shoulder and take a swing at life? Why is it that so many people, even if they set up their own business, never really get to the place that they were hoping it would get them to? I've been, again, very fortunate to have spent time around many successful people if you could measure success by whatever metric you want to measure it by financially. I've been blessed to have business mentors that are in the centimillionaire, multi-billionaire level, but very few of them have actually reached what I would call success. And that's because, having done what I've done now for 3.5 decades, I understand that there is a huge difference between a life chasing success and a life chasing fulfillment. And what I want to share with you today is some of the keys and the distinctions between those two paths. And again, if you take something out of here and it resonates and you move forward with it, even if it makes just a little impression, if I could just leave a little thumbprint on what it is that you go out to do to serve your passion, your purpose, live your truth moving forward, then I've served you, and that's the reason I'm here. That's my purpose. But I'm not here for you to agree with me. I'm very open to be challenged from your model of the world, because even though I'm at the front of the room with a microphone, I have absolutely no right to impose my model of the world on you. So I want to get that up front. I'm not here to tell you how it is. I don't have the answer. I have an answer, which is my answer. But in no way should you be open or unwilling to challenge that as it relates to you, because I'm not you. Is that a fair comment? So there's nothing more special about me. I've just had a certain path that I've walked that allows me to have some experience that some of you may not have had, because you've had your path with your experience. And if I can lead the path that I've walked and I've fallen over and hit my knee enough times, if I can shine the light behind me for those of you that are walking a similar path in your truth, I can help avoid some of those potholes, then that's really why I'm here. So on that basis, without any need to be right, let's begin. Thank you. Now, I mentioned earlier a couple of the words you're probably familiar with that have been given to you by family members and friends or people you went to school with: mavericks and crazies. As founders, that's kind of what we do. And I've been asked for many, many times over the years, what is the thing that makes a founder as opposed to a non-founder? What makes somebody as an entrepreneur different from a non-entrepreneur? And there's many different answers you could give to that. Persistence and desire and visionary and all of that stuff. But if I was to break it down into one answer, the difference between entrepreneurs and non-entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs and unsuccessful entrepreneurs, it would likely be the willingness to handle uncertainty. How many people here know what it's like to not know how much money you're going to earn next month? And actually be willing to know that there's a good possibility it'll be nothing or minus. Right, see, our friends don't get that. They don't understand that world. Come in, guys, all good. They don't. Hey, yes, thank you. We've been waiting for you. That's good. Yeah, grab a seat. So what I want to unpack today, even though I've got somewhat experience in business, I dropped out of school at 16. I've got no formal qualifications. I couldn't spell MBA. And I've gone for the last, what am I now, 53. So, I failed math as well. So I was at 30 years, 35 years. I've been completely unemployable. And through that journey, I've had somewhere in the region of 27, 28, I lose count, companies. Some have been absolutely majestic failures. Some have wiped me out completely. Some of them should have stayed ideas when I was drunk. And some have been global, international, multi-million-dollar success stories, and pretty much everything in between. So the entrepreneurial life is something I'm very familiar with. I've known nothing else. So, as I said, my tribe. Now, in the early days, the reason that I was an entrepreneur had to do with the avoidance of certain patterns that were really owning me. And I didn't understand this at the time. But what I was trying to do, and the reason I started my businesses to begin with, was because I was desperate to try to prove to the world that I was good enough, so that I could avoid the insecurities as a young man for the fear that I wasn't. And that led me to a very interesting path. On one hand, it made me successful. At a young age, in my early 20s, I'm buying Ferraris for cash and flying Concorde and doing all the stuff that I thought would make me happy to validate to the world that I was successful. Didn't understand the world didn't give a shit. And more importantly, I got to a point where even though by the external validation, I thought I should be successful, I felt inside that I wasn't. There was still something missing. Anyone ever relate to that? I'm doing the right things. Yeah, the money's coming in. I've got a lifestyle compared to the people I went to school with that is somewhat different. But ultimately, there's something missing. And I thought the answer to that was pretty simple. I wasn't working hard enough. I thought, when I make my first million, then I'll be happy. Guess what? Made my first million, still wasn't happy. But I managed to figure it out. Of course, the answer was simple. It's because I needed 2 million in case I lose the first. You know where that ends, right? Yeah, it doesn't. I've worked with people worth $700 million that are on Prozac because they're not a billionaire yet. That game doesn't change. And one of the huge advantages that I had, looking back, was at the same time that I got into business, I was 17 years old, I also got into personal growth. Now, the reason I got into personal growth was an interesting story. I was playing pool. I was 17. I was working for my dad. Anyone here ever worked for their parents? Yeah, don't do it. They don't pay you enough. It's called child labor, right? In some countries, there's laws against it. But my dad had a scrapyard. He had a junkyard, kind of owned his own job. And so, I grew up in the junkyard as my playground. But it really wasn't going to be my destiny. And I turned around to my dad at the end of the week and I said, you know something, Dad? I'm leaving. He said, what are you getting into, son? I said, honestly, I don't know. But I have a belief at the time, which I still have to this day, which says if you jump in the deep end, you can only swim. So I said, I'm leaving. And my dad was paying me at the time £40 a week. Not exactly big money. And I was paying my mum £10 a week board. I don't know if kids still do that these days. But I remember I left my dad. I had my last £40. I paid my mum £10 board. I paid my friend £10 that I owed him. And I had my last £20 to my name. And I wanted to start a business selling toys because nobody was really selling toys on the markets and something we call car boot sales in England or flea markets in America. So I drove to a wholesaler's. Now I had a little Mini. This is the days before Minis were cool. Old Minis. I'm 6'3". I don't fit in a freaking Mini. I'm going to take the front seat out so I can sit in the back and drive. But I drove to this wholesaler's and I remember looking around. I blagged my way in. I didn't have trade card. I wasn't established business. And so I just walked in as if I owned the place. And somebody comes up and says, oh, excuse me, can I help you? And I'm like, not really. It says, well, do you have an account here? I'm like, well, not yet. Oh, well, is there something I can do? I said, well, I'm a market trader. I specialize in toys. And I have stalls at Nottingham, Newark, and Peterborough. And I was mentioning all these like big markets. I was telling the truth in advance. And I said, somebody mentioned you on the markets on Sunday. I've been using so-and-so, and I just mentioned one of their competition. So I thought I'd come check you out. I thought, oh, certainly, sir. Would it be a check or a cash account? So I didn't ask for any ID, didn't ask for any proof of business, but they gave me a trade card. And that day, I had my £20, and I walked around, and my market research was quite extensive. It was like, would I play with that if I was a kid? And I ended up buying £15 worth of toys. And I got back in my little Mini, and I drove home, and I looked in the local paper about where the next car boot sale was. And it was the next day, and so I drove there, and I remember winding down the window, my little Mini, hand winding it down, and I handed my last £5 through the window, wondering if I'd ever see it again. That was the price of admission to go park up next to the other cars, open the trunk of your car, and start selling your stuff. And that was £25 worth of toys, and I sold everything that day for £50. I doubled my money. 15 pounds of the toys. I doubled up to 30 pounds. And I went back the next week, I bought 25 pounds of the toys. I gave 5 pounds through the window, and I doubled it to 50 pounds. My mum gave me credit on the board because she could see I was trying something. And that was my first business. It was called Pete's Toys. And my catchphrase was, Pete the Toy Boy. I was 17. It worked. Today, not so much. I probably need to open a bakery today to be a sugar daddy. Anyway. But that was my first business, and I built up and up over a few weeks until I got enough stock to cover a market stall. And I started doing markets and Sunday markets. And I remember I left my dad in June, and by October, I'd made my first 1,000. And I was so chuffed because I recognized there was a huge difference between making money and earning money. To earn money, I needed somebody else to give me a job. To make money, all I needed was my toolbox. And my toolbox was the right attitude. And I learned a big lesson that day because what I realized looking back on the markets, I would show up and I would set out my stall and I'd put out my toys. And some days I'd do really well. The days where I was feeling good. And other days, I'd sell virtually nothing. The days that I arrived not feeling good. Same market, same demographics, same psychographics, same toys, same price point. Completely different result. Independent of an external situation, all correlated to my internal situation. And that's what got me curious. Around about the same time, to supplement my lifestyle, I was playing pool. I was a bit of a pool shark back then. And I would show up at the local bar in my Mini, and I'd put my money on the table, and I would play, and it would be winner stays on, and you'd play for like £1 a game. And my budget was 50 cents, because it was 20 cents for a game, that shows how old I am, and 30 cents was the cheapest drink in the bar, which was a soda and lime. And that's all I could afford. And I was waiting for my game one time, and there was a gentleman at the bar, and he pulled out a mobile phone. Now we're talking 1989, yes, before some of you were here. Yeah. And back then you needed money for a mobile phone. Anyone could wear a suit. He was wearing a nice suit, but a mobile phone back then was like $1,000. And this is in the late 80s. So I'm like, wow, that guy's got money. He must know what he's doing. I go and strike up a conversation with him. His name was Del. Originally from Barbados. He was big black guy that was like in a pristine suit, spoke with a plum in his mouth with a typical English accent from a public schoolboy type of thing. And I just started chatting with him. And he was one of these things that I really wanted to be. It was called an entrepreneur. And not only that, he was quite old. He was like 22. And I was listening, fascinated to him telling me how he got enough money for the phone, he was doing business and this deal and that deal, and I was fascinated. And in that conversation, he said, you know something, young man? I see something in you that I see in myself when I was your age, right? He said, come in tomorrow, I'm going to leave something behind the bar you might like. I went back next day, and true to his word, the landlord says, hey, Seiji, there's somebody's left something. It was a carrier bag, and inside, it was one of the old Nightingale Conant 6 cassette tape series on some seminar on success. I went back home. I had one of these little pop-up tape recorders. I put on my little foam headphones, and I was on my bed listening to a live seminar, I didn't know what a seminar was, about this guy talking about success principles. And my jaw hit the floor. I'm like, wow, you've got to be kidding me. You mean there's an actual industry that teaches success? Where the bleep was that in school? Because that's what you want to learn, right? I don't want to learn algebra. I don't want to learn the periodic table. What, so I can validate my intelligence by, proving my short-term memory to regurgitate answers to questions that are irrelevant in modern society, so I can graduate with a piece of paper signed by somebody I've never met to prove that I'm smart so I can become successful? No. Let's just cut all of that stuff out and learn how to be successful. And that was what went on in my mind. So I decided at that point that I would Come in, guys. Give him a round of applause. There we are. So I decided at that point that this personal development thing had some merit. And I threw myself into the industry. Every bit of money I made, I bought a new series of cassettes or a book or what have you, and I started learning. Now again, the reason I was learning back then was to try to be successful so I could finally prove to the world that I'd made it. But it was a two-edged sword. One of the sides of the sword was, again, it made me successful at a young age, financially by that barometer. The flip side was, it absolutely burnt me out. I was starting to work 130 to 133 hours a week, running 4 different companies, dozens and dozens of staff, and I was falling asleep at traffic lights, and I was yawning for a living. I would make excuses walking into meetings that I'm going to yawn. It's not because you're boring. It's because my body wants more sleep than it gets. Anyone relate to that, by the way? Hello, it's called startupitis. So what happens? Well, I was driving home one night, 2 o'clock in the morning from the office as usual, and I fell asleep and I hit an intersection at 60 miles an hour, which woke me up, would you believe, in more than one way. Luckily, I wasn't hurt too badly. The car wasn't very happy. But I remember sitting at the side of the road waiting for the tow truck, shaking, thinking, what the fuck just happened? And there's a certain point, as you might get to during this conversation, where I started asking better questions. Questions are the steering wheel of the mind. Questions direct focus. Ask a better question, get a better answer. Ask a lousy question, you know the game. And I was sitting at the side of the road, and I started asking, why am I doing what I'm doing? Why am I building a monster that's trapping me? That's not what I signed up for. And I started looking around. I started looking at successful entrepreneurs that had the material side, but they also weren't stressed out. They weren't burnt out. They had a great life. They were passionate about their business, and the times that they worked, they put in 1,000%, but they weren't consumed by it to a point of it burnt everything else out. And I started realizing that there are certain ways to approach your business, your life, that's radically different. It doesn't seem different from the outside, but it's very different from the inside. And it parallels a model that I want to share with you that really had its genesis in what Albert Einstein said. Uncle Albert, pretty smart guy, never met him, but knew his stuff according to form. And he said this, he says, you cannot solve a problem at the same level of consciousness that created the problem. Sounds smart. Sounds like something Einstein would say. How the hell do you pay your mortgage with that? How do you make it practical? So I looked at a model, because consciousness is that 13-letter word that science doesn't enjoy. Because traditional Newtonian science is very outer world focused. It's material based. It focuses on particles. And we have mastered the rule set that governs the outer world through reverse observation, starting predominantly with Copernicus, moving into Galileo, moving through to Isaac Newton, and using the rules of what we've observed, like standing inside a giant Swiss watch. We've seen how things work, and we've calculated predictability on the rules. Meaning that we can understand biology so well that we can repair the human body. We can change somebody's heart for somebody else's heart. We can put a capsule in orbit and send it around the moon and bring it back. See, our 3 main sciences, physics, chemistry, biology, physics dealing with particles, chemistry dealing with molecules, and biology dealing with cells, we've cracked that game pretty much. Hence why we've risen to the most dominant species on the planet with a technological level that has been dreamed about by generations. But the non-physical, this thing called consciousness, how do you figure that out? Because you can't put it in a box. Traditional science thinks that consciousness is a byproduct of brain function, because that's the only model they can come up with that fits within their paradigm. Your brain doesn't produce consciousness any more than a television writes and produces programs. So how do you make sense of that? If Einstein says you can't solve a problem at the same level of consciousness, how do you translate that? Well, there's a model I want to share with you, and if you're familiar with my work, you've probably heard this before, but as I say to my students, the war cry of failure is, I already know that. So keep an open mind. There's what I call 4 levels. This is an original model from Michael Beckwith that I've kind of built on and formed part of my, most of my philosophy can be built around this model. The first or the lowest level of consciousness, and see where you fit on this in different parts of your life or people that you know. The first level of consciousness is what we call to me. To me is called to me because the mantra of somebody at this level of consciousness is, I would have the business, I would have the IPO and the exit, I would have the body I want, I would have the partner, the car, and everything else. But you know something? Everything happens, come on, to me. Everything happens to me. It is the quintessential level of victimhood. Now, as you've probably figured out, nowhere in humanity or on Earth School, as I call it, is the concept of victim rewarded. You doubt that? Go to the savannah in Africa. Have a look around. So if you're in victimhood, and how many people know somebody that is a to-me person? Yeah, we all do. About 70% of the world, unfortunately. But when you realize that that doesn't serve us, that's kind of going to give us escalating feedback, including more drama, more unfulfillment, more discomfort, less fulfillment, all of that stuff. Drama begets drama. You ever heard the phrase that misery loves company? Bullshit. Misery loves miserable company. So if you grow out of that, you go to the next level. The next level, which is where a lot of people in here sit, and that's the level of by me. By me is the achiever level. By me is, you know something? I know that complaining about life and why things happen to me or should happen to me or what this kind of stuff isn't paying the bills. So if I am going to get the car, the body, the partner, the life that I want, it's going to happen by me. And so now, instead of standing on the edge of the river of life complaining at the temperature and why the boat hasn't come to pick you up with a first-class ticket, you dive in the river and you start swimming upstream towards your goal because you're going to make it happen. Anyone relate? Hell yeah. Slight challenge with that. Anyone found it exhausting? Anyone found that as soon as you take your foot off the gas, you start to backslide? Everyone realize that you're kind of fighting reality and the son of a bitch keeps winning? So by me is where I was at driving home at 2 o'clock in the morning in the car. And it was asking that better question that really led me to understand that there is another level. There's actually 2 other levels, 4 levels of consciousness. The next level is the level of through me. Through me is where life flows through you, where you're not fighting the river of life, you're actually flowing with the river of life. And at that level, things start to show up a lot more effortlessly. Doors open, synchronicities happen, deals come together, opportunities present themselves. And it's a very, very different way to live and be an entrepreneur. It's a very way to live and be a parent. But living in through me is what I've dedicated the last few decades of my life to understanding and being able to teach frustrated entrepreneurs specifically. Because if you can understand the rule set that governs that, you can make a shift in your life today that absolutely transforms your life, your business, and your relationship to it. Now, I said there was another level. That's called as me. As me is where all the spiritual masters arrived at and taught from. It's where I see myself in you, I see myself in you, I see myself on the floor. It's the non-denominational word, you'd call it oneness or non-duality. Now, I'll be honest, that's not what this class is. Anyone want to go do ayahuasca? You might get a glimpse. But for me personally, it's above my pay grade. I'm not here to talk about ASME, not this lifetime. So what do you got to do to go from to me, victim, to by me, achiever? What do you got to give up? What do you got to replace it with? Pretty simple. The first thing you have to give up is blame. If you are blaming anything, and I mean anything, yes, your lazy ass staff, the government, the tax collector, if you're blaming anything, the idiot that just cut you up in traffic, you give up blame and you replace it with personal responsibility, you can move very quickly from victim to achiever, from to me to by me. Now, most of you are already aware of that because it's a path you've already taken. But what have you got to do to go from by me to through me? What do you got to give up? What do you got to replace it with? Well, the first thing you have to give up, and some of you aren't going to like this, is the need for control. Come on, how many felt that uncomfortable? All right. Now, notice I didn't say control itself. I said the need for control. How many micromanagers in the room? Come on. Control freaks? I know who you are, the rest are lying. So, if you give up the need for control, what do you got to replace it with? Trust in what?
Delegation, your team, your fellow men.
Well, the challenge with trusting in your team is that most of you will never acquire the kind of team you can trust while you're still trying to micromanage. So, what you really have to trust in is something bigger than you. Now, I'm not here to speculate around what the label of that should be. Whether you want to call it the universe, whether you want to call it divine, the G word, or any of that kind of stuff. The travesty of humanity is that for centuries we've gone to war and killed each other over whose version of that label is right. So I'm not here to debate that. But what I'm here to say is that if you trust in something bigger than your own ego, something that is intelligent enough to allow you to be here, and you're able to hand over the need for control, you are going to have a very different relationship from by me to through me. What do you got to go from through me to as me? What do you got to give up? The illusion of separateness. Again, every spiritual master has taught that. If I was to have a bowl or a saucepan of milk, and I was to have my hand inside and I was to just poke my fingers through the top of the milk, the illusion is that they're all separate. But if you strip the milk away, you'd see that everything is connected. And there isn't a quantum physicist on this planet right now that would argue with the fact that at some level we are all connected. Give up the illusion of separateness, what do you replace it with? There's only one thing: unconditional love. Now, the problem is most of us don't have a reference for unconditional love because we never received unconditional love as children, because our parents didn't know how to give unconditional love in a way that we felt. So we grow up projecting our own model of the world into our relationships and wonder why we struggle. That's a different seminar. But those 4 levels of consciousness, what Einstein said, you can't solve a problem at the same level of consciousness. Now, what didn't he say? Let's have a look. He didn't say you can't solve a problem from the same level of skill set. That's why most people going to college today are chasing skills in order to try to get certainty. And never the twain shall meet. Certainty is an internal frame. Skills are an external frame. So if you're chasing skills in order to feel certain enough to fill in the blank, you're always never going to feel certain enough and you're going to chase more skills. And we see this in academia a lot. You know, as long as I get to college and get my degree, yeah, good luck with that. Yeah. As you can tell, I never suffered the disadvantage of college. Sorry to those of you who did. But what happens when you graduate from college? You still don't feel as if you've got enough certainty to go out in the world and go be successful. Because what do you really need? You really need an MBA. So let me go do my MBA. And at the end of the MBA, how do you feel? Well, I've got the certificate, but there's still something kind of missing. So, I know I need my PhD. And it goes on and on. And we see this in personal growth a lot. Or let me take the course, because the course is promising me that I'll get this skill, and with that skill, my perception is I'll be ready to go do this. And so I take the course and I get the paper, and I still have something missing. Oh, I need the advanced course. And then it's the trainer course. And then it's the train the trainer course. And the train the trainer trainer. You get the idea. That's pattern that is running is where you're trying to get skills in order to replace certainty. Now, having employed, I don't know how many hundreds of people in my career across my businesses, if somebody comes in front of me and they've got a resume, I'm not that interested. A resume is an echo of who you've been. I want to hear your voice as to who you are now. And all resumes are the same thing. It's like a first date, right? Let's put my best foot forward and tell you all the great things about me. Oh yeah, by the way, I've got another foot, but it stinks. So let's not show you that part. What's a resume? Right? Same deal. It's like business plans. How many people here have written a business plan? And you know the game. Nobody cares about business plans. The only reason a VC or a private equity firm or a bank wants to see a business plan is so they have some level of certainty that you actually know what the hell you're talking about. But all business plans are fantasy. They follow the same path. They overestimate income. They underestimate costs. At best, they're a guess, and at worst, they're fraud. Tell me I'm wrong. So, when it comes to looking at the pattern, you can't educate your way up the map of consciousness. It is an internal shift. You can't try to buy me your way into through me. Oh, show me what I got to do to go to through me. What are the things I need to do? I'll go do it, because that sounds like a really good place. Right? You're missing the message. So, what I will do is I'll share with you some of the blocks that stop people from getting there. Because one of the other things I've learned is that there is a huge difference between physical maturity and emotional maturity. Have you noticed that? See, physical maturity, we don't get to vote on. That's part of the rule set. I don't care how many creams you put on, ladies. I don't care how many vitamins you take or peptides, guys. In 20 years from now, you're going to look different to what you did 20 years ago. That's part of the biology and the rule set that governs it. We don't get to argue with that. But emotional maturity is a choice. Have you noticed that there are some emotional teenagers walking around in some very adult bodies? Some of them probably working for you. So, what are the keys to emotional maturity? Because if we could ask and answer that question, we should find some of the keys to being able to raise consciousness to a point where you're letting go of the need for control and you're flowing with the bends of the river. So rather than investing your time and energy, which you all have, certainly as founders, and investing that into trying to fight the current, you use your energy to position yourself better in the current. So emotional maturity. Let me give you some of the things that will probably stop you. You know, I worked very graciously for about 15 years with Tony Robbins. I was one of Tony's most experienced trainers for, say, a decade and a half. And one of the things that Tony taught me was if you want to get good at working with people, get good at spotting patterns. Because there's only so many of them. And most of us are distracted by the false flag of the behavior. Behavior is irrelevant. If you're complaining at somebody's behavior, you already missed the boat. Looking at what are the unconscious patterns that drive the behavior, now we're getting somewhere. You can start to address it. Give you an example. Where's those perfectionists in the house? Come on, hands up. Perfectionist? Anyone? See, it sounds really good, doesn't it? I'm a perfectionist. Now, what is a perfectionist? It is a language pattern that you've given yourself to feel good about what's really going on. Because if I told you what perfectionism really was, you wouldn't feel so good. But perfectionism sounds a little altruistic, doesn't it? There's nothing wrong with trying to be perfect. There is no such thing as perfectionism. Evolution isn't finished yet, so why do you think we are? What is perfectionism really? It's, I'm scared of screwing upism. Ah. See, any shy people in the house? Yeah, like you're going to put your hand up. But what is shy? Shy is a racket. I'll tell you what shy is. Shy is, please don't let you discover me because I'm scared of your judgment. That's shy. It's not, oh, I'm just naturally introverted. No, slap. Get in the game. Learn how to handle rejection. The fear of rejection is what keeps people shy. I would rather not have courage to go through things that are emotionally painful from my perspective and stay small and emotionally immature than I would actually risk being embarrassed, but actually growing as a result of that, moving past the pattern and limitations of insecurity into becoming the person I was born to be. Follow? Procrastination? Anyone here procrastinate? Both hands? Right? What is procrastination? Let me explain the pattern. Because most people try to make the mistake of curing procrastination with motivation. Ever tried that? Yeah, how's it working for you? Temporarily at best, right? So what is procrastination? Procrastination is very rarely understood, and it's not really talked about in personal growth, and it's certainly not addressed in the way that allows you to see what it really is. I mentioned earlier that we all have a primary fear. Anyone remember what it was? Who said that? You're cheating. Can't give you a book. Okay, I'll think of a different question. So, the fear that we're not enough. So, your brain, when it comes to procrastinating, acts like this. Imagine you've got a corridor and your decision to engage in something you've been putting off, means that you need to take actions that will walk you down this corridor, and at the end of the corridor there is a door. And you open that door to either a successful or an unsuccessful result. You with me still? Yep, nodding helps. With me still? Or are you all distracted by people that keep coming in and out? Thank you. I can always tell when someone there because I have like 100 people do this. So as long as you're not doing this, that's fine. So at this point, your brain calculates in advance what is the chance or the percentage of, at the end of this corridor, the door opening to a less optimal result. And if the chances of you failing are high, which would trigger the fear that you're not enough, it will find another corridor for you to walk down that the chances of success at the end are higher. Like cleaning your cupboard. You follow? See, procrastination is a psychological autoimmune disease. It is trying to protect you from the fear of failure, not understanding that by not walking down the corridor, you've already failed. But it won't tell you that. So how do you get over procrastination? It's not by trying to kick yourself in the butt. You get over procrastination by surrendering the fear of failure of what's at the end of the corridor. If you're able to let go of that, because ultimately, most of what we sweat is pretty much small stuff. You know something, if I do write this new ad campaign and it isn't that successful, then what really is going to work? I'll try something else. So when we let go or surrender the fear of failure as to what's the corridor, there's nothing then stopping you from walking down it. So let's just make that practical for a second. How many people here have got something on their to-do list that they've been putting off? Come on. Yeah, all of us. So I want you to think of that for a second. Hold that in mind. What is one of the things you've been putting off? A task, a project, a part of a project, whatever it may be. Now, what is the outcome that doing that action is going to lead you to? What is the result, the reason why you would do that? Can you identify that? Now, what if you knew that that result was guaranteed successful? How would it change your relationship to starting whatever it is you've been putting off? Anyone feel a shift? What if you were able to look at the worst case scenario and you were to say, well, you know something? If it didn't work out that way, what else would I do? And you come up with an answer that's okay. No one's kidnapping your children. No one's putting a gun to your head. You know, if it didn't work, I'm going to get feedback. I'll readjust and make it better. So just go there. Don't make this intellectual. Just go there for me emotionally if you have the courage right now. If you're okay with it not working out the way you want, how many people, be honest, felt a drop in resistance to starting the project? Different to motivation, isn't it? Because you're addressing the root cause. So that's what I'm talking about when we talk about patterns. So let's get back to the emotional maturity question. What's some of the things that are stopping people from going through that level of emotional maturity? Well, one of the big patterns that I see a lot is this nasty, sticky, smelly substance that most people wade through their entire lives. It's called goop. And if you ever find yourself stuck in goop, it's a really sucky life. Goop stands for the good opinion of other people. Now how many people recognize a bit of goop here and there? So how do you get rid of goop? Well, I'll share with you a metaphor I often use, because I believe that we all star in a movie. I don't want to be a movie star today. Yeah, well, you are. Why? Because you star in a movie called The Movie of Your Life. Now, I know you star in that movie. Do you know how I know? Because you're the only one that's in every single scene of your movie. Correct? Which means by definition, everybody else in your movie plays one of two roles. At best, they are a supporting cast. Maybe a partner, spouse, sibling, boss, best friend, what have you. But the vast majority of people in your movie, for the entirety of your movie, are nothing more than film extras in your movie. Now, what's the definition of a film extra? I'll share. A film extra is somebody that you're no longer thinking about when they're not in your current scene. Follow? The person that served you at Starbucks yesterday. Film extra. Get the idea. Now here's where it starts to go a little south. Because we walk around thinking that we're the star of our movie, and as a result, we think that everybody else sees us as the star of our movie. But they don't, because they're not in your movie. Whose movie are they in? They're in theirs. Which means, by definition, we play one of two roles in everybody else's movie. The first role, at best, handful of people, supporting cast. Which means when you're not in their scene, they may be thinking of you. But the vast majority of people that you will meet in your lifetime, you are nothing more than what in their movie, ladies and gentlemen? Film extra. So what does that mean? I'll tell you. And this you want a tattoo on the inside of your eyelids. Most people don't care enough about you to bother to give an opinion. Why? Simple. They're too busy being worried about what they think you're thinking of. Bingo. Everybody's walking around this bubble of self-importance thinking, I wonder what everybody's thinking of me in my bubble of self-importance. While everybody else is actually walking around in their bubble of self-importance thinking, I wonder what everyone else is thinking of me in my bubble of self-importance. It's a sham. Now, when you get that, not just intellectually, but emotionally, you're able to burst that bubble. And at that point, the good opinion of others dissolves in the illusion it always was. It's a bit like, anybody here old enough to remember the original Scooby-Doo cartoons? Any Scooby-Doo fans? That's the only impression you're getting today. So what was a Scooby-Doo? It was always the same, wasn't it? You got the mystery van with all the gang in. They pull up at some village, and Scooby and Shaggy, they go out to find food because they were always hungry, and it was all about food and Scooby snacks. While the other three go off, and they talk to one of the locals, and they find out that this village has been haunted for decades by some strange mystery ghost in the big mystery house on the hill. So, in the meantime, Scooby and Shaggy are off, and what happens? They encounter the ghost. Woo! And they go. And what happens in every single episode? It's always Daphne, isn't it? Yeah? One with the glasses. She figures it all out. She's always clever. But what happens is they finally pull the sheet off the ghost, and it's some midget with 2 broomsticks. Right? Most of what you're scared of is nothing more than a midget with 2 broomsticks. And the moment you stop running and you turn around and you face your fear, as Robin Sharma would say, the fears we don't face become our limits. Goop strangles people in ways that you would never really understand the depth of when it comes to sabotaging your potential. Because one of the things I loved about talking with Dory earlier is that the founding principle with the Karisma Club is a word that's very close to my heart: authenticity. You cannot be authentic if you have aspects of goop. Why? Simple. You're always going to be adjusting who you think you should be in light of what you perceive, listen to my language closely, what you perceive to be other people's approval patterns. Has nothing to do with that in reality, but everything for your perception is your reality. So when you're able to walk amongst them and not be affected by them, when you're able to show up as being you, doesn't mean to say you don't care. Of course you care. That's a value structure. But you cannot be authentic if you're worried about what other people think. You certainly can't be successful in business if you're ever worried about what other people think. How many people made a bit of a shift around that in terms of their understanding? Burst the bubble. See, if you can let go of the need for control, if you can show up as a better version of you because you're no longer being pushed, pulled, manipulated, cajoled into this version of you that has to make people happy. Any people pleasers in the house? Recovering. I like that. Yeah. A recovering people pleaser. How long have you been recovering?
All my life.
Exactly. Right? So, what is people pleasing? Again, look at the patterns. Don't look at the behavior. If you grew up in a household where, let's say, mum or dad had a temper, and you didn't know if dad was going to be violent, angry, critical, and they had a trigger. Anyone have parents like that? Yeah, well, you're not quite sure. There was a bit of a trigger and you didn't want to pull it. So what would happen? You'd have to learn how to keep the peace. You'd have to not push the buttons. You become very conflict averse. You don't understand why these people are arguing. Anybody here quite happy to stand their ground in an argument? Very different. See, from that perspective, you probably grew up in a situation where if your voice wasn't heard, you didn't feel significant. Let's say you had siblings. And if you grew up in a household where you needed to actually assert your sense of identity, you got no problem with conflict because it was just a natural thing and part of the pecking order. You didn't see it as the avoidance of conflict because you don't want to trigger something. If you grew up in a household where it was very strict, very orderly, you probably rebelled against that and you started getting into more of the creativity side. You would escape in either your imagination or through arts or music or whatever it may be, because that was like the human personality is like a water balloon. You squeeze it here, it has to come out somewhere else. If you grew up in a place where there was no predictability, you didn't know if there's going to be food in the fridge. You didn't know if mom was going to pick you up from school on time. There was always disorder and chaos. You gravitate as a personality towards order and structure, and it has to be on time. How many people here get to the airport at least 3 hours early? Yeah, I know who you are. How many people here rock up just as final call goes at the gate? Yeah, my kind of car. Yeah. Freaks out my guy. I'm like, do we have to camp out at the airport 2 weeks before the flight? No. Let me go. So these character traits are not so much who you are as opposed to the adaptations you created in order to navigate your world. Does that make sense? Now, you've heard the argument nature or nurture. I'll solve it for you. It's both. If you are naturally creative and you grew up in an environment that fostered that creativity, and you become a successful musician or an artist or ideas person or visionary, great. If you were naturally creative and you were shut down, apart from some level of rebellion, or you were put into a school that didn't foster that, then your potential, your innate potential, the nature part, is not going to be as developed. But here's one thing I've learned in 30 plus years of studying humans. Environment beats will over time, every time. Meaning, you become who you hang with. Your environment has way more impact on you as a person than you realize. I'll demonstrate. Our good friend from Australia, where's he gone? He's around somewhere. Yeah, had earlier. Anyone here been to Australia that's not Australian? Yeah, it's a beautiful country if you like, everything that's poisonous and can kill you. I spent a lot of time in Australia. Beautiful country, a lot of friends there. But if I go to Australia for 2 weeks on holiday and I come back, do I have an accent? No. If I go live there for 2 years and I come back, what do my friends say? Oh, you picked up a bit of a swang. What are you talking about? Throw another koala on the barbie. Right? Probably not like that. My point being is when you arrived in Australia 2 years ago, did you immediately sign up for an online masterclass in how to have an accent? No, of course not. Did you go to night school to learn how to be an Australian? No, of course not. But your environment over time impacted you unconsciously at such a level, it affected every single word coming out of your mouth. Environment beats will. Now, let me ask you a different question. What kind of financial accent are you speaking with? What kind of financial environment did you grow up in or have you spent your life in? And how has that affected your financial relationship to money? Do you think money is hard to come by? Do you think you're a good custodian of money? Do you think you deserve money? Do you think money's limited? Do you think you have to work your ass off like your parents did or whatever it may be? Or do you think that money is an unlimited renewable resource that you can manifest whenever you want at whatever levels you want? Two different countries that you're living in on planet finance. Different accents. One of the businesses I started was in the space business. No, it wasn't SpaceX. I set up a company called Space Energy. We were pioneering back in 2005, 6, 7, all the way through 2013, space-based solar power. It was a multi-billion-dollar project. Our non-commercial demonstrator was $300 million. We were having meetings with governments. I was employing some of the top people at NASA. And it was a powerful business. We were all passionate about wanting to create a new source of energy for the planet. Unfortunately, the commercials didn't work. It was too far ahead of its time. So after sinking millions of dollars out of my own pocket and some friends, family, and fools' money, I had to let that business go back in 2013. We handed over the technology developments we'd done to the United Nations. It's now being capitalized upon by people like Jeff Bezos and Elon in terms of what we were able to pioneer, but we weren't able to make it commercially successful. But when I started that business, I'd never been involved in a multi-billion-dollar project. And our chief finance partners were Natixis, which is a French commercial bank. We had Boeing as our partner. We had Bechtel for our project manager. And when I first started getting around investment bankers, they would have these conversations all around MBTs. Millions, billions, and occasionally the T word. And that was so far out of my comfort zone. I'd never built a $100 million company, let alone a billion-dollar company. So there was such a disconnect. Well, I promise you, after about 3-4 months, my conversations with investors and banks around millions, billions, and trillions was like pass the salt over breakfast. It was normal. It completely expanded my financial comfort zone, which, by the way, you've heard the term comfort zone. Another lie. There is no comfort zone. There's only a familiarity zone. But we resist what is unfamiliar because it's discomforting, hence the term comfort zone. What are you doing in your financial comfort zone? Because right now, what you've surrounded yourself with is a level that you've come to accept as normal. Interesting question, right? See, if Richard Branson tomorrow, and I've had the privilege of sharing the stage with Sir Richard a few times, if Richard Branson got down to his last 5 million, currently worth close to 4B, but if he got down to his last 5 million, how do you think he would feel? Panic button, right? If I gave some of you 5 million, you'd retire. Maybe not in this room, but you get the idea. Same money can't be the money. It's your relationship to it. Follow? So, if Richard Branson did lose everything tomorrow, throw out some suggestions. How long do you think it would take him to be a multi-millionaire again? Throw it out. Very quickly. Be specific. Have a guess. There's no right or wrong answer. 6 months? A year? You wouldn't be surprised if within a year he's back to being a multimillionaire, would you? No. Most of us didn't come from money, which is why our parents would be very surprised if we became multimillionaires. But that has nothing to do with anything other than his current identity as a multi-billionaire. And this is where we get into a critical part of today's sharing. For some of you, what you're going to hear from me today is going to sound good, hopefully. And you're going to leave here today and not apply much of it. And the reason for that is because it lands at what we call an intellectual level. Makes sense. I'm speaking English. You understand English. There's nothing untoward about that. So you understand what I'm saying intellectually. But smokers know they shouldn't smoke, correct? There's no logical argument you could compile that would convince you that smoking cigarettes is good for you. We know that. Smokers aren't oblivious to that argument. They don't ignore the warnings on the packet because they can't read them. So why do smokers smoke? Interesting question. Let me help you answer it, because the lessons in here will translate into you being an entrepreneur and whether you'll be a multimillionaire or a billionaire. So if you learn something and it lands intellectually, the lesson we get from the smoking example is simple. It means nothing. Knowing and not doing is the same as not knowing. So why would a smoker attempt to quit? The reason, for most of them, is that it goes from an intellectual level of understanding to the second level of understanding, which is the emotional level. Meaning that you're sat there at home and your 6-year-old daughter comes running up, screws up your cigarettes and throws them at the window and says, Daddy, Daddy, I want you to stop smoking. I don't want you to die. I want you to walk me up the aisle when I'm 18 years old at my wedding and I don't think you'll make it. How do you feel, dads? Leverage. Or you get a little bit of tightness in the chest, you go for an x-ray and the doctor comes back and says, listen, I've got some bad news. If you stop smoking now, there's an 80% chance you'll live. If you don't stop smoking now, there's a 100% chance you won't. What just happened? Did you suddenly become smarter? Did you suddenly now understand the warnings on the packet? No. You had an emotional shift about a previously intellectualized level of information. Follow? See, when you go from intellectual understanding to emotional understanding, it is the genesis for starting a behavior change. Without that, knowing and not doing is the same as not knowing. So you'll have people that say, whoa, that's it, I am done smoking. And then you see them 3 months later, what happens? They're lighting up again. Why? Because they didn't go to that third level. See, the third level is where change moves from instigation and temporary to permanent. And that third level is the level of identity. See, we do and not do so much based upon who we think we are. Any vegetarians in the house? Okay, no judgment. Why do vegetarians not eat meat? I'll give you a clue. Is it because they have different teeth? No. Different digestive system? No. Vegetarians don't eat meat because their identity is, I am a vegetarian. Now, the reasons they chose to be vegetarian could be unique and varied and personal. It could be moral reasons, it could be health reasons, it could be taste reasons, it doesn't matter. Once they've made the decision, it governs what they eat off the menu. You follow? It's effortless. They're not saying, should I do the ribeye tonight? No, I'm going to push, no, I'm a vegetarian. That conversation doesn't happen. Because they are vegetarians. Why do runners run? Any runners in the house? Okay. Why do you run? Because you're a runner. You see them out there when it's raining, like pounding the street. They get angsty if they don't run for like a week. And there's other people sitting in the dry thinking, they're mad. Look, there they're off running in the rain. Why would anyone do that? Just like your family look at you and say, starting a business, why would anyone do that? Because your identity is, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a founder. This is who I am, therefore, this is what I do. You follow? And the congruency of that identity is going to determine how you show up under crisis, which is built in by design. It's going to determine how you show up when your supplier goes bust, owing you $500,000. It's going to determine who shows up, what part of you shows up when your 3 key managers leave and set up in competition and take all of your customers. Who you are at that point governs what happens next. Not what you learned at Harvard, not what you learned online, but who you are. Everybody follow? So one of the questions you want to be asking yourself is not, how do I get better at business? Okay, Siri can tell you that these days. The question you want to be asking is, who do I need to become in order to be the founder that takes my company to that level? And that sends you on a very different path. Mic drop. Oh no, it's a notebook. Sorry. Now we'll get into questions shortly because I know you guys are getting fidgety. But I've got a few things to throw at you until then. And as I've got the mic and you're sitting down, there's no escape. Block the doors. So let me share one more model with you that I think might be useful. That'll lead you into that understanding of where we go in terms of emotional maturity as it relates to being a founder. There is a concept that I teach that kind of epitomizes the by me to through me journey. And it starts with a metaphor. And the metaphor is that of a dog track. Anyone know what I mean by dog track? Where they race the greyhounds and all that kind of stuff. Now, if you've never been to one, but I'm sure you understand the concept. When they open the trap, the greyhounds run and people bet on who's going to be the first greyhound past the finish line. Okay? Now, I'm not getting into debates about animal rights. It's only imagination. It's okay. Right? But why do the greyhounds run? They're chasing the rabbit. Not just any rabbit. It's the white rabbit that goes round. And this is what I call the curse of the white rabbit. Now, when I say that, because it sounds a little Alfred Hitchcock kind of Hollywood, I need some feedback. So when I say the curse of the white rabbit, I want you to go, dan, 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 just to see if you're awake. You up for playing? Of course you are. Okay, so when we talk about the curse of the white rabbit, I knew you guys would be great. The dogs run, but do the dogs ever catch the rabbit? What if they run really fast? Do they catch the rabbit? No? What if they have a better diet than the other dogs? Does he catch the rabbit? Have a better trainer? Sleep in a better kennel? No. Why don't the dogs catch the rabbit? The game is rigged. The game is rigged. Ah, there you go. You can have a book. English or Spanish? English. Oh, there we are. Give me a hand, ladies and gentlemen. You're very welcome. I'll sign it later. It's not my book, it's just a random book I picked up outside. So, the game is rigged so that no matter how fast the dog runs, it's never going to catch the rabbit. It gets close enough to the rabbit. What does the guy in the tower do? He says, oh, I'm going to crank up the speed. Now, as entrepreneurs, as founders and co-founders, most of the time, we are the greyhounds on the track trying to catch the rabbit of success. Whatever that is, your next goal, your next quarterly target, your next whatever it may be, acquisition. Now, occasionally, even if you catch what you think is the rabbit, how long does the feeling of fulfillment last? Usually. Not long. Because what happens after that? Another white fluffy tail appears, doesn't it? Son of a bitch, go. Now, if you look at the greyhounds, could you imagine a greyhound getting to the end of the race? And imagine we could speak greyhound for a minute. I'll translate. The greyhound turns around to his friend and says, you know something? That's 3 races I've ran this week. Won 2 of them. Still haven't caught that frickin' rabbit. I quit. I'm done. The greyhounds do that? No. If you see a greyhound at the end of the race, they are ecstatic. Why? Because they were born to run. See, entrepreneurs that are trapped by the curse of the white rabbit. Thank you. That was like 5 out of 10. When we're trapped at that level, it's because we are linking our happiness, fulfillment, and success to the acquisition of the rabbit. But unfortunately, the game is rigged. Because, and this is another one of those tattoo on the inside of your eyelids deals, you can never, ever, ever, underline, ever, am I making myself clear? Ever, catch the rabbit of fulfillment by running on the track of achievement. Why? Game's rigged. You will never do that. Why do the dogs chase the rabbit? Because they're born to run. That's what greyhounds are bred for. Why do entrepreneurs start businesses? It's what we do. It's who we are. But if we're linking our happiness, our success to our next quarterly report, to the next acquisition, to the next deal, to the next whatever, we will never, ever find a place of fulfillment. So how do you break that curse? Answer's too simple for most people. But if you want to stay and buy me for a little bit longer and keep banging your head against the wall, come talk to me when you get a headache. But there is one way that you can actually break the curse of the white rabbit. 6 out of 10. I can see you're all fascinated, because this is one of the concepts that can make that little shift. You break the curse of the white rabbit by coming to not the intellectual understanding, but at least the emotional understanding of the fact, and it is a fact, that you already are that which you seek. Let me say that again. You break the curse of the burnt out, frustrated entrepreneur, buy me specialist by coming to the point where you actually own the awareness that you already are that which you seek. Now, from that place, you can go build businesses, you can go swing the bat, you can go chase after whatever you want to chase. Why? Because that's what you were born for. And you damn well know it. That's what makes this group so unique. But if you get caught up running around the track of achievement to try to catch the rabbit of fulfillment, you're going to go from Achiever Alan into stressed out Simon, into burnt out Barry, graduating into Heart Attack Harry. How many people know what I'm talking about? And I've seen it way too many times. My billionaire, multi-billionaire, business mentor, Errol. I was saying earlier on the podcast, I've spent 15 years with Errol. We lived together a couple of times. We started businesses together. I never knew him earn less than about $1 million a day. Now, I know can't live on it. It's a good start. But Errol was the epitome of everything who I did not want to become when it came to money. He sadly passed away 3 years ago. And Errol and I had some very interesting conversations around the mindset of, for him, it was all about he had to win. Didn't realize that when he passed away, his billions of dollars and his Gulfstream and his luxury multi-zillion dollar homes all over the world, they didn't bury it with him. The only people that tried that were the Egyptians. What happened? I'll tell you. We dug it up and stole it. Never seen a funeral car with a roof rack. Doesn't work. So the question becomes not how do I play the accumulation game so I can get to the end of the game to realize I was playing the wrong game. The question becomes how much of me really showed up? How much of the game did I actually enjoy? How much was driven by the patterns of the needs and the insecurities and the validation and the goop and the approval and all of that stuff versus me getting up and swinging the bat because that's what greyhounds do. Me getting up and saying, win or lose, I'm in the game. I don't need a Patek to validate who I am at the table. I don't need a Black American Express card to finally feel good enough. I don't need any of that stuff. Several years ago, 2017, I was arguing a multi-billion dollar company that should remain completely nameless, as Hewlett-Packard. And I was fighting a multi-million dollar business deal in court with them. We'd done some business years before, and I'd bought $12.5 million worth of goods. I'd paid for it in full, and I'd resold it at a small margin. IT, 1, 2, 3%. Several years later, I get a knock on the door by Mishcon de Reya, Princess Diana's divorce lawyers, one of the most ruthless law firms in London, $100 million firm, suing me for $17 million. As one of those days. I'm like, what? They said, yeah, we're suing you for the difference between the wholesale price you bought it at and the retail price in store. Because I was buying it about 60% offers in the wholesale market. I'm like, how do you work that out? Well, they never give you permission to resell it. I'm like, they never gave me a contract saying I couldn't. I'm not an authorized distributor. The only contract terms was that I couldn't retain title until they were paid in full. I pay in full, I can do what I want. I can give it away, I can set fire to it, I can do what the hell I want. And what they were upset about was that some of their distributors had actually bought some of the stuff from me cheaper than what Hewlett-Packard was selling to them at. Not my deal. Acted completely within my rights and within the terms of the business, and I was just trying to make a little bit of extra money in IT to help fund my space deal so I didn't have to lean more on friends, family, and fools. Anyway, they're suing me for 17 million. I'm like, this is a crock of shit. A, give me a contract that I've signed that says I couldn't resell it. There isn't one. Tell me, if you knew that I was reselling it, which you did because one of the people buying it actually paid you directly for one of our invoices, and you kept reselling us after that, then why didn't you say something then? How much money did you make on the 12.5 million? Because if you admit to making a profit, how can you sue me for a loss? And who in the history of anywhere has ever walked into Tesco's or Walmart and bought $30 million worth of IT? You don't. You buy it from the wholesale market, same as I could, for about the same price. This is bullshit. It says, yeah, we kind of know that. However, here's a freezing order that handcuffs you financially worldwide. Here's an order from the High Court that takes your passport and it's going to cost you $200,000 to defend it. So give us $100,000 and we'll make it all go away. Fuck you. I have an indigo temperament. For those that don't know what that is, it's I kind of resist institutional authority. Anyone relate to that, entrepreneurs? Yeah. Tell me about it. It's got me thrown out of better countries than this. Anyway, so I'm like, no way, it's just unjust. It's just not fair. You've got bigger financial muscles in the playground and you want to bully me. No judge in their right mind would entertain this for 5 minutes. Screw you, I'm not playing the game. So to try to put pressure on me, they came up with a contempt of court application saying that I breached the freezing order. And I hadn't, and I looked at their argument, and it was clever, what you'd expect from a $100 million firm. But I'm like, judge will laugh that out of court in 5 minutes. So we go to the High Court in London, and a little bit longer than 5 minutes, but after 3 days, he threw me in prison for 6 months. As the only non-criminal. Civil action. Never been arrested, never been accused of a crime, still no criminal record. Put me into Pentonville, the most violent prison statistically in Europe. Guy just got stabbed to death just before I arrived. Attempted murders were weekly. Blood on the floor was a daily occurrence. It was a fascinating environment. I'd only ever seen stuff like that on Shawshank Redemption, or Prison Break. And so I go from a successful business, 50-odd staff at that point, in 6 figures a month in revenue at that point for that particular business, to 3 staff in 3 days. And then being saddled with close to $250,000 worth of debt, legal fees, blah, 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 blah. So I'm about to go into prison. I'm standing there thinking this isn't going according to plan. And when he sent me down, I originally got an 18-month sentence. Now, as a civil prisoner, you do automatic half, unconditional release. So that meant 9 months. I appealed. As it turns out, they dropped it to 12 months, so I actually served 6. Now, when things happen that you're not expecting, we call that a bend in the river of life. How many of you have had bends in the river of life? Of course, we all have. Do you know why? It's by design. The reason it's by design is because one of the next aspects of emotional maturity, in fact, probably one of the greatest days in a human being's life, when it comes to emotional maturity, is where you finally wake up to the understanding, congruent understanding, that life is a growth-centric experience, not a comfort-centric experience. And the way that we grow, ladies and gentlemen, is by how? Go to the gym. Challenge. You see, your problems are not problems. They're either basic life tests, or at certain levels, like this one, for example, you may have a graduation event. And a graduation event is basically a serious outer world circumstance engineered by your non-physical support team to give you the opportunity to demonstrate, do you actually live what it is that you know, or are you just talking about it? If you're a health coach, expect a health challenge. Why? So you can see if you can walk your talk. If you're a relationship coach, expect a relationship challenge. Why? To see if you're actually authentic or not in how you deal with it. You follow? It's by design. So when I was standing there and the judge dropped his hammer and the guy approached me to put the handcuffs on to walk me down the stairs underneath the court. And by the way, I had a seminar booked for 3 weeks down the line that I just spent £50,000 on Facebook ads to sell £50,000 of the tickets to people to come listen to me for 3 days as a business school, which I used to run. And now, and then we'd upsell in the room, so we'd make profits. So now there's no money. I've got £50,000 worth of people screaming at me as a fraud because I've just gone to jail for some $17 million bullshit. And it was an absolute shit show, you could imagine. And all I could do is walk down the stairs. But at that point, I had a choice, as we all do. Vince the victim or effortless Eric. Now, I know this material well enough to understand what a graduation event is. So by default, I didn't get upset, I didn't get angry, I didn't get overwhelmed. I got excited. Why? Because I asked better questions. If I live in a friendly universe, which I believe that I do, then why is this happening? See, Vince the victim would say, oh God, why is this happening? Effortless Eric says, why is this happening? So I started to understand. At that point, I'd been teaching what I teach for about a quarter of a century. But the real people that I could help, the real people that I resonate with, people like us, that's a different vibe to the people in prison, certainly in Pentonville. The people in Pentonville have never listened to podcasts for the vast majority. They don't sign up for personal growth workshops. Now, prison isn't full of bad people, don't get me wrong. It's full of a lot of good people that have made bad decisions. But there are some bad people in there, I can promise you. But I'm like, wow, if the universe wants me to go into a place that is so dark that I can carry some light, what a mission. Now, remember what I said earlier about identity. Who walked down the steps is way more important at that point than anything else. If I'd have walked down see myself as a victim, so courtroom shenanigans and all of that bullshit and complaining and upset, you fast forward 6 months and that's a predictable place where I'm going to be. So I knew I had to choose an identity at that point that was empowering. So I decided to choose, I was going to become a secret agent of change. I was being sent in as an undercover Jedi. And I went to work. And I was excited. I mean, what an amazing mission. And I went in and I started writing letters every 2 weeks to my students. And the first letter that I ever wrote, all by hand, was, hey guys, don't worry about me. I'm simply on location for 6 months filming the prison scene of my amazing movie. And it was genuine. Long story short, because you can get it in the book, I ended up stopping suicides. I was getting people off drugs. I redesigned the intake system to reduce violence between the wings in ways that's now being used in prisons all over the world. I won a national award for the work that I did inside. And I look back on that adventure as one of the most incredible privileges I've ever had the opportunity to live. And yes, I came out $350,000 in debt, 0 credit rating, virtually 1 month rent in the bank, and had to start all over again. How exciting! I'd never dug myself out of a hole that deep before. Let's see how that happens. That was July 2017. By 2018, towards the end of 2018, I'd managed to claw my way back from $350,000 in debt to $250,000 in debt. How exciting! Direction of travel. Some of you are looking at the scorecard and ignoring the direction of travel when you're really doing pretty well. April the 9th, 2019, I decided that I didn't want to be in England anymore. I spent a lot of my time around the world prior to that, but I was back at my home in England, and I wanted to go live in Tenerife. Why? Who wouldn't? I had 2 children, which is Archie and Bella. They're twins. At the time, they were 5 years old, Jack Russells. And 2 hungry dogs. I put all of my stuff in the back of a van that I borrowed from my friend. I spent 2 days driving down to the south of France, driving from north to south Spain to Huelva, and from there 2 days on a ferry to Tenerife. I landed in Tenerife on that April 9th. It was my 7-year anniversary last week. And I arrived, say, about $250,000 in debt and 1 month rent in the bank. I says, right, let's go again. And instead of how do I get more money, the focus is on, emotional maturity tip, how do I add value? How do I serve? Because you only ever get money by adding something of value for it first. I didn't have a lot. I didn't have any online reviews. I had some bullshit they'd written about me for this $17 million crap. I had some loyal fans. I had the 11 letters that I'd wrote in prison to my students that said they'd changed their lives so much that I should make it public. So I published them. That's the Spanish version, a book called The Inside Track. Anyone want a Spanish copy? Yes. Okay, first hand up at the back. There we go. Lady in red, give her a hand. Thank you, my dear. Published in many languages now, all over the world, and I do believe. Oh. Here's some more I made earlier. Just to stop you falling asleep, we'll see who's some more hands up in a minute. But this book has pretty much been called by, there's just some of the quotes from some of the personal development legends on the back, from Brian Tracy to John Assaraf, John DeMartini, Kevin Trudeau, saying it's the best book they've ever read in personal growth. It's changed the lives of pretty much everybody that's ever read it. And the reason for that is because it's real. I didn't write this afterwards as a memoir. This is my personal diary and unfolding day by day as to what's happening, trying to show my students how I'm dealing with that kind of deal. Because if I can deal with that, what excuse you got if your partner comes home upset, or your daughter's not doing well at school, or your staff starts embezzling, or whatever it may be? It's an amazing way to give you a road manual for how to deal with adversity in a positive way. And again, I don't say that to impress you, or more so impress upon you the fact that everything we have is a choice. And that choice starts with the question, who am I in relation to this? Relation to your business, relationship to your relationship to your body, in terms of health. Those kind of questions make the biggest difference. And again, so we come full circle to what I was saying about the ability to handle uncertainty. Is life going to give you situations that present opportunities to face uncertainty? Yes or yes? Got it. Just check the time, if I may. Oh, marvelous. So the answer to that is yes. So how do we learn how to handle that? Well, I'll share a quick story with you that taught me everything I needed to know about uncertainty in 60 seconds. You up for me sharing a story? All right. So let me say this off. So I mentioned that I grew up in England, which means that I never saw the sun until I was 12. But I had this passion as a young boy that I wanted to be a skydiver. Anyone here ever jumped out of a perfectly good airplane? Okay, a few crazy people. I'd expect that in this kind of crowd, to be fair. So I couldn't learn to jump in England, but I wanted to do my AFF, accelerated freefall. I wanted to become a licensed skydiver. So I thought, where's the best place I could do that? And I came up with Florida, because obviously in Florida, you get pretty much guaranteed sun. So I went there, and as I said earlier, I dropped out of school at 16. I'm not very academic. But I thought to skydive, it's got to be pretty easy. You jump out of a plane, you pull a cord, and gravity does the work. I was wrong. I get there, and I do 8 hours in class of some pretty intense ground training. I got to learn everything about my equipment, how it works, how it goes together, what happens if it goes wrong. Great focus. Everything about aerodynamics, hand signals in the air, plane entry procedures, exit procedures, all of the stuff, radio communication. I had to learn everything, and I was very overwhelmed. Now, how many of you here have been overwhelmed at some point in the entrepreneurial journey? Join the club. Welcome for being human. So the emotional route for most people is this, that overwhelm leads to confusion, which leads to inaction. In other words, we learn so much, we do nothing. We get paralyzed, or paralysis by analysis, they sometimes call it. So I'm leaving the classroom. It's approaching sunset. And all I want to do is go home, review my notes, and kind of get my head, I've got brain fry, get my head in order. And just at that point, one of my instructors comes running out of the classroom. He says, "Hey, Peter, guess what? There's one slot left on the last load of the day. It's called the sunset load. We're on it." Okay, so I guess this is happening. So I put my jumpsuit on, I put my rig on, and I get on this plane. And on this plane, there's about 30 other skydivers, all quite advanced. And there's one other guy who's also his first jump. Now, for your first jump, you have 2 instructors that come with you. It's not like a tandem where you're attached. This is free fall. It's AFF. So they jump out, and if I'm falling, they're falling either side of me, and they're giving me hand signals and testing me if I'm going to pass my level. So I'm sat there, and I've got my 2 instructors either side of me, and I look over at the other guy with his 2 instructors, and he's doing this. Not breathing. The engines kick on. We start going down the runway. We start to take off. We start to circle up to altitude. All of a sudden, The other skydivers notice that we're the newbies. So they start doing what they would normally do. First jump, yeah. Seriously, you're not jumping with that parachute, are you? Why, what's wrong? Oh, no, nothing. It's all good. Starting to tease. We get up to 10,000 feet, 3,500 meters, and the red light comes on, which means prepare. And I look over at the other guy, still not breathing. And we carry on, we get to 12,000 feet, 4,000 meters, and the green light comes on. They open this door, and this icy blast comes into the air. And all of a sudden, the skydivers start getting up, and they're doing kit checks behind each other, tapping them on the shoulder, thumbs up, high five, backflipping, somersaulting out of the door, into the abyss, gone. Crazy people. There's just me and my 2 instructors, and the other guy and his 2 instructors left in the plane. He's nearest the door. He's going first. I'm happy with that. So he gets up and he walks to the door like dead man walking. And I'm thinking, this guy's not looking in good shape. And he gets to the door and he grips both sides of the door. And the instructor turns around. It's a legal question on your first time in skydiving by the USPA, United States Parachute Association. For insurances, you've got to give a positive answer. So they say, are you ready to skydive? You obviously say, yes. So the instructor says, are you ready to skydive? Stop. Nothing. Are you ready to skydive? And he peels his hands off the door, closes his eyes, and jumps back inside the plane. And I'm thinking, this guy's not going to go. So anyway, these instructors, they've seen it all before. They know people are nervous. It's the first time. You're about to jump into a freaking abyss. And they calm him down. They get him set. And I'm watching this fascinated. Anyway, he's looking a little better. Okay, right, we're ready? We're ready, right. So he comes back up to the door. Stands there. And his physiology is actually much better. Right up until the point he looks down. And he freezes. And he's got his hands on the door like this. And he goes, are you ready to skydive? Nothing. I'm like, this guy's not going to go. Anyway. Are you ready to skydive? I thought, that's it. It's my turn. Like, it's not going to happen. This guy says, John, are you ready to skydive? And he peels his hands off the handles. He looks up. He goes, no, no, no. He goes, what was that? Go, go, go. And they push him out. And they jump out after him. And I'm sat here like this. I'm like... And I go to my 2 instructors. I'm like, did you see that? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, but why did they do that? And I'll never forget what they said. So it's pretty simple, really. Yeah, you don't jump, we don't get paid. And at that moment, I suddenly realized this was only ever going to be a one-way ticket. See, there are going to be times in business, ladies and gentlemen, where you are inside the plane and you're going to be looking at the plane thinking, the door thinking, no, no, no. And at some point life is going to say, what did you say? Go, go, go. And you're going to be forced to take whatever decision you have. How many people have now skydived? You know what I'm talking about. Anyway, now it's my turn and we're at close to 13,000 feet. Okay, Pete, I can do this. This is it. Yeah, ready. It's a long way down. Come on, now I can come. Come on, get in state. I can do it. I can do it. I can do it. Are you ready to skydive? I'm like, he's having a laugh. Like it matters, right? Okay, come on, this is it. This is it. Ready? Ready? 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, and go. Oh, okay, I'm falling. Stabilize, stabilize. Okay, arms up. Here we go. And stable. Checking altimeter. Okay, we're at 9,500 feet. 9,500 feet and falling. Here we go. 8,000. Instructor 1, visual check. Instructor 2, visual check. Okay, first instruction, arch more, arching more. Second instruction, relax. Okay, here we go. We're now down to 6,500 feet. We're coming up to it. Here we go. Ready, circle of awareness, check. And waving off now. And here we go. And go. Please open. And I went from 120 miles an hour to 15 miles an hour in 3 seconds. which taught me my biggest lesson that they never shared in class. You should only get your straps wrong once. Anyway, so next minute I'm under canopy and I'm floating down and everything's great and I'm coming in. I've got my instructors carried on. They opened earlier, so later towards the ground. So they're on the ground. They're giving me instructions, pull a right turn, put a left turn, come down. I'm coming into the landing zone and I drop. I do a perfect parachute landing roll and I'm down. It was amazing. And I get up and I've got a big smile and I pulled up my chute and I put it over my shoulder and I'm walking towards the hangar and I see the other guy, the guy they pushed. And he had a big smile on his face too, probably because he was alive. But I get towards the hangar and all of a sudden this realization hit me. And it's a realization that changed my life. Well, hang on, what just happened? See, when I was in the plane, what kind of emotions do you think I was feeling? Fear, overwhelm, anxiety, stress, worry. The second I left the plane, what happened? Fear, gone. Anxiety, stress, left it in the plane. Why? I'm falling. I'm doing it. I'm in the moment. It made me wonder, how many times as entrepreneurs have we sat inside the plane when the opportunity came, the green light came on, and we sat there worrying, stressing, being overwhelmed, refusing to step out of the door, when all we really needed to do was leave the plane and get in the game? Or how many times have we wanted to go and approach somebody because we wanted to ask them for a date, and we sat there trying to pluck up the courage only to watch somebody else come in and jump out of their plane first? You get the idea. Now, when you learn how to handle uncertainty by doing one thing, you become massively certain that you can. See, an addiction to certainty is what keeps the other people out of this room. No one with an addiction to certainty is going to go do a startup. No one with an addiction to certainty is going to risk rejection when they go ask somebody for a dance or a date. No one with an addiction to certainty is going to realize their entire potential, because the illusion is that certainty exists. Where does certainty exist? It doesn't. See, the strongest winds create the strongest trees. Trees don't grow in the best soil, the strongest trees. The best, strongest trees grow in the strongest winds. So if you want to become the best version of yourself, start praying for a storm and don't bitch about it when it shows up. That's who we are. That's why we're here. But if you have any level of addiction to certainty, you're going to resist that with everything you've got. When I decided to engineer my next graduation event, I know that Pentonville, the prison, that I wasn't planning that. But I also know the Olympics is every 4 years. So I thought the next one I'd like to choose on my terms. So a couple of years ago, I decided to sign up for what is essentially the world's toughest sporting event. And anyone here ever run a marathon? Okay, a few of you, good call. 42 kilometers, 26.2 miles. And depending on whether you're fit or professional, you can do it in anywhere from plodding around in 4 or 5 hours to doing it in under 3 if you're a pro. Yeah. For years, that was the benchmark of endurance. And then came the ultras. Ultramarathon I ran back in 2003 was the Marathon des Sables, a marathon a day, back-to-back for 7 days across the Sahara, with day 4 being a double marathon. My advice, don't do it. Oh, well done. Who's the MDS guy? Ta-da. Oh, that deserves a book. There we go. Outstanding, fellow MDS guy. Yeah. But the MDS is what, 10 days with 7 days of running, so you've got a couple of days either side getting out. Was it from Ouarzazate in Morocco? Yeah. So if you look at arguably the toughest sporting event on television, you're looking at probably the Tour de France. 21 days of grueling cycling across the Pyrenees. What I chose to do made that look easy. The world's toughest row. Rowing unsupported across the Atlantic Ocean 3,000 miles in nothing more than a beefed up canoe with 2 little cabins, one either side. I chose to do it with one of my best friends, former Royal Marine for 22 years. And what made this interesting is that there's no engine, there's no sail. I'm not even allowed to hold up a t-shirt to dry because they class that as wind power, and everything has to be arms and oars. When it comes to the safety boat, it's usually anywhere from 4+ days away. You've got to be on your game. And we left December the 11th from La Gomera in the Canaries, taking the same route that Christopher Columbus took across the Atlantic on 2024. So, 15 months ago. The regime is that somebody has to be rowing at all times because otherwise you drift. The only way you can control the boat is getting water under the rudder. So we do 2-hour shifts. Somebody rows for 2 hours, somebody recovers for 2 hours. 2 hours on, 2 hours off, 24/7 for just under 2 months. Everything is self-sufficient. Meaning you've got to cook your own food, you've got to desalinate your water, you've got to manage your batteries with the solar panels, you've got to figure out your own navigation, and you've got to leave Antigua and hopefully hit a little port 3,000 miles away in the Caribbean without making a mistake and ending up in Brazil or Antarctica. It's like, no penguins in Antigua. It was an incredible journey. And I learned quite a lot along the way. One of the things that I learned is that Lee, as a Royal Marine for 22 years, was very much in warrior mode and very much in which level of consciousness do you think? By me. Yeah. Go make it happen. That's a warrior's mentality. Go conquer the outer world. Now, Lee had some issues. He actually got knocked out twice by a rogue wave on his shift, smashed his head against the side of the boat. He was concussion. I had to row solo for a week out of the just 8 weeks that we were rowing. And a lot of other things. But what was fascinating was that Lee hadn't done any personal growth. He was a warrior. So he was trying to control a lot of the uncontrollables, trying to power through, just like most entrepreneurs that are stuck in by me, working 133 hours a week before their intersection 60 mile an hour a moment. When I would have my row, it'd be my turn, and we'd swap over. After about 4 days, we hit our first major storm. 11-meter waves for 4 days. Now, 11 meters is a pretty serious wave. It was terrifying, and we could never train for that. You don't go out and train in 11-meter waves. Right? So it was absolutely terrifying. I remember the first night when the waves started being monsters, and we're scared of the boat going sideways and rolling and capsizing and doing all kind of stuff. And there's never been a year where all the boats in the race have made it. And after the first day, you don't see any other boats. You're on different strategies, and some have 4 that are rowing 2 and 2 and all the rest of it. But I was terrified. I'd call Nadia every night on the satellite phone, and I was crying because I just had so much emotion coming up about trying to stay alive and figuring if we could make it and wondering if we were going to have to get rescued and everything else. And so the most fascinating thing that happened as we got through that storm was that, and the waves started getting calm again, was that I noticed a pattern. That's what I'm trained to do. But the pattern was fascinating. The pattern was that whenever Lee would get on the oars as a committed warrior in by me, the outer world would respond in a very interesting way. The waves would change direction, get a little harder. The wind would either drop if it was in our favor or pick up if it wasn't. He would be dry for the first 3 minutes, and a rogue wave would come and dump on him. He'd have to sit there rowing wet for 2 hours, or he'd stay dry until the end, and just 2 minutes before his shift ended, he'd get wet, so he'd have to go in the cabin and be wet to try to recover. Whenever I got on the oars, things would shift. The waves calmed down. The wind would be a little more in my favor. There was never any time where I got seriously injured, like Lee. And it gave me the most in-your-face example consistently. And I mentioned it to Nadia after about a week of noticing this. I'm like, it's now, once you notice it, it's like, wow. Now you see the pattern. And it was just consistent. And it reinforces one of the most fundamental truths that I can leave you with today. If you remember nothing else, remember this. outer world follows inner world. You don't deal with reality, you generate your reality. And if you're trying to fight the mirror, what do you think the reflection's going to give you? And that was fascinating. Through me is where you understand outer world follows inner world. You give up the need for control. You stop frowning at the mirror because it's not smiling. What are you doing by me? You look at the outer world, you don't like what you see, so you're upset, and you go and try to get a piece of lipstick and draw a smile on the mirror. Try to fix the outer world to fit your pictures. Wonder why it's temporary at best. The other thing we had to learn was the night before we set off, Lee's sister-in-law passed away of cancer, leaving 2 young kids under 10 years old. We wrote her name on the side of the boat, and we kind of took her spirit with us. But there was many times during that crossing where we had to also come to terms with the prospect of not making it. One rogue wave snapped our rudder. This is carbon fiber 6 times stronger than steel. And one wave snapped it in half. And it was a raging sea that I had to go in order to try to fix the rudder, to try to repair it. And I remember leaving a video message, essentially for Nadia, saying, hey, listen, I've got to go under the boat. The sea state is horrendous, but it's got to be done. If you find this video, know that it was my decision. Don't blame Lee. You know, this is something I've just got to do. I love you. And I put the phone back in the cab. When I got under the boat, it's the closest I've ever come to drowning. I was being lifted out of the water 2 feet and slammed 2 feet underneath. It took nearly an hour, 7 times back on the boat, throwing up seawater in a fetal position to get enough strength and breath to go back on the outside to get under the boat to try to put the rudder to get it fixed. I got absolutely nothing left. Now, bearing in mind, the nearest human at this point, apart from Lee, is in the International Space Station. The nearest land is 5 miles underneath you. This is, you know, there's no cavalry. There's no fallback. There's no plan B. But it had to be done. And at that moment, you had to remind yourself how to reconcile the fear of death. Because if you think that death is the opposite of life, you're going to go kicking and screaming into your final scene. And every one of us has a final scene in our movie, do we not? Non-negotiable. So if you think death is the opposite of life, you're going to be afraid to die. And while you think that's being afraid to die, how it actually shows up in real world is being afraid to live. But what if you knew that death was not the opposite of life, death was simply the opposite of birth? That you were more identified with the actor that's playing the character of the person of your life. That part of you that can't be killed. That part of you that is immortal. How would that change your relationship to failure, to not making your quarterly goals? How would you live? When we finally pulled into Antigua, 49 days, 7 hours, and 22 minutes later, it was a journey that I look back on, and the greatest gifts that I had at the time were the challenges we faced. This year's event that just went had a very smooth crossing. It's pretty uneventful. We had the worst weather in the history of the race. And when I look back, I'm so grateful for that. I'm so grateful for the challenges. I'm so grateful for the ability to share the stories about the rudder and how Lee got knocked out and 20 other things, how the water maker stalled and had air bubbles and airlocks and we couldn't get rid of them and we thought we had to hand pump and all of this stuff and being slammed by waves and having 2 oars, carbon fiber, snap like toothpicks with the power of the ocean. Don't get your shin in the way. That's what I remember the most. What I'm going to invite you guys to remember the most about your business careers are not the times you popped the champagne, not the times you inked the deal, but it's the time that your rudder snapped and you had to get under the boat. The times where you didn't know if you were going to make it or not. Because when you get to the end, as you will, and you look back, they're the memories that you're going to say, that's what made me who I am. That's what prepared me for the world that I now command. That's what allowed me to grow into the better version of who I am. Because if you think life is comfort-centric, life is going to give you the lesson that it isn't. I'm going to invite you to have the attitude, the mentality, and the opportunity to embrace that part of whatever's going on in your life right now. Because every single one of us faces our own road, do we not? For some people, it's a business failure or bankruptcy. For some people, it's a dramatic divorce. For some people, it's a stage 4 diagnosis or having a loved one die in their arms. Lee and I were lucky. We just got the Atlantic. Everything's perspective. So the last message I want to leave you with today is being able to take what I've shared, and I'm going to encapsulate it in one final share. This was a lesson that taught me when you're faced with the fear of letting go of what you fear to lose, what should you do? I have a big picture one of my students gave me, a framed picture of Master Yoda, one of my great mentors, above my ice bath at home. And it says, train yourself to let go of everything you fear to lose. What an insight. Train yourself to let go of everything you fear to lose. Many years ago, I had a situation where I flew to Vancouver Island to do a songwriting course. And I fancied, doing this, but I was a pretty busy, head-up-my-ass entrepreneur, executive-y type person. I was working the 100 hours a week. I was an idiot to work for, way back. And the guy that was leading the workshop was kind of a spiritual, very wise, very grounded, very energetic guy. And I asked him a question. I said, his name was Edwin, since passed away. I said, Edwin, I've got a question for you. We talk about the energy of the sovereign, the energy of the warrior and the archetype of the lover and the magician. I says, when I'm in the boardroom, when I'm building a business, when I'm in charge and I'm the visionary, I've got more resourcefulness, more courage, more whatever it takes than anyone alive. You show me a problem, I'll deal with it, I'll destroy it, I'll get my goal. When I'm with my parents, I never feel that. Why? He asked me some questions. So because my dad specifically grew up, he was born in 1936. My dad grew up in an era where showing emotion was weakness. So I got into personal development at 17. You come in here, I see you guys, you hug each other. I wanted my dad to hug me. Occasionally I might get a handshake. Not because he didn't love me, I'm sure. It's because that was the emotional language that he had. And I asked Edwin, I says, why do I not feel that strength, that courage, that certainty when I'm with mum and dad? He asked me a question. He says, well, how do they hold your energy? What do you mean? The question was English. He says, how do they hold your energy? And I thought about it. I said, when I'm in business, I'm the king. When I see them, I'm the prince. It's an identity shift. And my dad's emotional language was, in order to show some level of connection, he'd always be trying to fix things around the house. Now, one of the proudest things I did as a son is when my parents divorced, I bought the family home, and then I bought them a house each to move to, which my father reminded me of every time there was a problem because I was the landlord. But I thought, I lose that. I almost subserviate myself because they hold me as the little boy. They could be 90, I could be 60, they're still going to hold me as the little boy. That's just where parents are. Anyway, for the first 3 days, I didn't write any songs because I got my head up my ass and I only noticed big stuff. Day one, I saw people, trees, ocean. We're in Tofino on Vancouver Island, beautiful paradise. On the second day, I started seeing birds and flowers. By the third day, I could see insects. It was this like unwinding from the office that kind of just gradually allowed me to become more present. And on the third day, I wrote a song about my dad. It was called Father, Why Did You Stop Loving Me? Anyway, had some breakthroughs, and I flew back to England weeks later, and I got a plane to Heathrow. I got a train up to Leicester, my hometown. I got a taxi to my home, and as I pull up at my home, there's my dad in my garage putting up a shelf. And I got out of the car and I said, "Oh, son, welcome home. I was just trying to fix something for you." I says, "Hi, Dad." I said, "What are you doing tonight?" "I don't know." "Why?" I says, "We're going to have a drink. I'll pick you up at 8 o'clock. And even my energy about how I was speaking was different. Anyway, I picked him up at 8 o'clock. We went to his favorite bar. We sat down, and I said, "Dad, I need to have a conversation. You see, I've been in personal growth for a long time, and I meet people for the first or second time. We give each other a hug, and I want to have that kind of relationship with you. I want to be able to connect with you. I want to be able to have conversations where we can go a little deep." And my father was big, old school, sat there, uncomfortable, arms folded, shut down. How do you think I'm feeling? Even more disconnected. And I actually thought, you know something? I'm pushing him away. That's emotional nonsense. I'm losing my dad even further. And there was a fear that came up at that point. Is, do I just say, forget it? Hey, don't worry about it. Let's get another pint. Or do I push? And something said push. And I kept going. And eventually, after about several more minutes, his arms came down and his face softened. And we had a conversation, man to man, that we'd never had, that fundamentally changed the relationship for the previous 30 years. And thank you. Time flew by. They rang the bell and started to drive him home. And I pulled up outside the house that I bought for him. And I said, "By the way, Dad, I also wrote a song." And I sat there and I sang him the song. And I've never seen my dad cry. Yeah, big, strong guy. And I managed to not cry until I'd finished singing. And at the end of the song, he threw his arms around me and he says, "Son, don't ever think that I don't love you." I said, "Well, do you remember the last time you hugged me?" He said, "No." I gave him the date. It was several years before when I bought him his dream car for Christmas, and in a fit of emotional overwhelm, he threw his arms around me for a moment. And at that point, we had a very different relationship moving forward. I never realized that 7 years later, he would die of a stroke. Still in his prime, 72 years old. Yeah. Healthy and strong by every other metric. And I also knew that the last time I would ever sing that song would be at his funeral, which I did. But I look back and I thought, if I hadn't had the courage at that time to speak my truth, to stand for what I wanted to stand, to be willing to let go of everything I feared to lose, I would have never have had that time with my dad. Now, some of you, that time may have already passed, but I can promise you they're still listening. For some of you, it may be that you want to make a conversation or a phone call tonight. For some of you, it's about letting go of the judgment you had for why they didn't love you the way you expected. But I'd encourage you to let go of what you fear to lose and go close that gap. Because there isn't anything, none of the tens of millions I've made since that coming out of prison, none of the cars, none of the houses, none of any of that I wouldn't give to have another night with my dad at that level. And when it comes to understanding who we are in relation to our movie, when it comes to being able to give our truth and walk our truth and give the best of who we are, when we stand up, when the opportunities present themselves, when the business ideas come, when you're circling at 12,000 feet and that nervousness comes up, look it in the eye. Stand true, stand proud, and jump out of the plane. I love you. Thank you. I don't share that story often, by the way. I know we've got a little bit of time now for some Q&A. You've heard me talk enough, although I don't give short answers often. But if anyone's got anything they want to share or any questions they've got, I'd be more than delighted to spend whatever time we have left together to try to share something else. So, yeah, any questions? We've got mics. Feel free. Yes, up front. Mike.
Thank you. So the question is, we've talked a lot about through me and by me, yeah, and how to navigate the line between giving an effort where it's due and pushing too hard and like basically doing it by me, yeah.
Great question. The illusion of through me from a by me perspective is that effortless means you're not working. That's not the case. You probably can work harder, longer hours in through me than you can in by me. The difference is, how enjoyable is it? Are you having fun? See, when it's not fun anymore, I question whether I'm doing it for the right reasons. What started your businesses was passion, was it not? Yeah, that idea that kept you up at night, that you couldn't wait to talk to somebody about, that you kept talking to people about even when they were sick of it. That came from that place, not a spreadsheet, not a SWOT analysis. It's like, no, I'm doing this because you felt something. When you stop feeling that, you've been dragged down to being from the entrepreneurial inspiration into the manager of something that's now controlling you. That's the time to start questioning. Maybe not to stop the business, but to stop how you manage your relationship to the business. Are you under stress? Are you trying to control what you can't control? Have you lost that passion, that spark for what started it in the first place? You disconnected from the vision that you had and the lives you would change and the difference you would make because now, oh crap, I've got to make payroll Friday and I don't know how to do it. That's how you know. Follow up? Sure.
What about 18th mile of marathon?
The 18th mile?
Yeah, when like it feels like there is no enjoyment, but you need to. I mean, you ran marathons.
Reiterate something. And I ran a marathon last year as well, yeah, at the North Pole, as you do. But when it comes to looking at marathons, it's a goal for a lot of people because of the level of achievement. But if you look at the people who run and finish marathons for the first time, we're not talking about the pro athletes and the people that have the references of previous successes, etc. The first time marathoners. There are more people that succeed that are running for somebody else or something else than they are for their own ego. Most people that are running because they want to show off their medal or finally feel that they've achieved something to prove to the world that doesn't care that they're good enough, never make it to the start line. Or they struggle. Whereas the other people struggle as well, especially at mile 18, if you're running not on ketosis, but you're running on glycogen. So at mile 18, you're either sinking energy gels to try to replace the 4 hours store of glycogen in the body. Yeah, I did the North Pole Marathon on 9 training runs. Why? Because I'm carnivore. I didn't take energy gels. I was saving the butters on the ship, the icebreaker that got us there, and I was running around eating the butter. Now, because it was North Pole, it was like toffee. And I was having to get hot water from the aid station to try to melt the butter in my mouth to keep going. It was a lot of fun. But the reason that most people succeed, as I said, let go of the need for control, replace it in trust in something bigger than you. Why are you starting your business? Because if it's to prove to mum and dad that you're finally successful because dad never gave you the hugs because he thought you were useless, or to prove to the teacher at school who said you'd never amount to anything, or prove to your elder brother who's more successful because you're a middle child and you never got the attention, that's a different energy than setting it up because it's your truth. And that is when at mile 18, you're going to push through no matter what.
Thanks so much for the structure that you give us today. My question here is, I've always lived through the lens of to me versus for me. Mm-hmm. You mentioned the to me, by me, through me, as me. If my belief is that for me is that connection or that belief, that trust of something bigger than yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Where does the for me stand in your 4 levels?
It relates to what Einstein said. Another question he asked is that one of the most powerful realizations you can come to is deciding whether you live in a friendly or a hostile universe. If you think you live in a hostile universe, everything with teeth can kill you, and you're either to me if you feel that you can't control it, or you're in by me trying to control it. If you live in a friendly universe, then things happen for you, not to you. You change your language. It's like, it's not, oh God, I've got to pick the kids up from school. It's like, wow, I get to pick the kids up from school. And so, when I was rowing, it would rain out of nowhere, especially the closer we got to the Caribbean. We'd have these squalls come out of nowhere and absolutely dump on us. And I would always look for the rainbows, be able to take pictures. My hands, it took me 2 months to be able to straighten them because they were curved around the oars consistently, pulling, especially in some of the hard seas, which was just absolutely exhausting, like pulling through cement. So it took me about 2 months to get the default position away from here. And my hands were covered in blisters, salt blisters, sores. Skin was red raw. It was a tough call. But in that moment, I had to be grateful that I had hands rather than moan at what wasn't there. So it's silver lining. Now, what Einstein was actually pointing to was something more profound that most people miss. Because the reality, my friends, sorry to break it to you, you don't live in a friendly universe. Nor do you live in a hostile universe. You live in a self-reflecting universe. You get to choose. 2 men sat behind prison bars, one saw mud, the other saw stars. And so when you talk about for me, and again, semantics on language, you're at that through me level. The reason I say through me rather than for me is because for me does focus a little bit on self more than other. It's great for the friendly relationship to the universe, but ultimately when I'm in flow, I'm able to contribute more than have it all be about for me. Make sense?
Yep, 100%.
Cool.
Thank you.
And as you were saying, the outer world is a reflection of the inner world. And there is a lot of things that you can do that build over time for you to feel that confidence and all those like things that help you get that outer world to be like you want it, right? But like there are moments that you really are like, it's really hard to wake up. It's really hard to, start your day and try to do things. So you have like, if this was a toothache and you know that you need to get treatment and that's like, the long run, let's say, that little pill that eases the pain so you can face the day and try to build on that reflection, if that makes sense. Am I making sense?
I think so. Let me see if I can paraphrase.
Okay, thank you.
So, when the storms come, how do you turn it into something that isn't as stormy? Is that kind of where you're coming from?
Basically, like how do you, what's the first step that you take into the storm?
Understanding that at lower levels of consciousness, to me and by me, they are predominantly content before context. Through me and as me is context before content. So let me explain. Let's say I have a bottle of water here. And that bottle of water, pretty transparent. And let's say the contents of that bottle represent the content of my life, the stuff of my life. It's your business, your partners, your money, your no money, your religion, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, whatever. It's the stuff. The bottle is how we hold the stuff. Now, what most people do throughout their entire life is they're not always satisfied with what's in the bottle. They're trying to change it. I want a better car. I want a better body. I want a better blah, 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 whatever it is. So they're stirring the stuff. Now, if let's say you wanted, you looked at your life and you're like, my life is so transparent, so boring. And you go to a seminar and somebody gives you the key. You sign up for an online masterclass and you finally realize that the key to having a fulfilling life is blue. Blue, of course. I don't know, your boring, transparent life. Blue's where it's at. So you try to sell your car and buy a blue car. You wear blue clothes. You eat blueberries. You do blue stuff. And you're trying to change the stuff in your life. Great. And you've got everything blue. And about 6 months later, something missing. So you go to another masterclass. What happens? Oh, how could I have missed it? Red. Red is where it's at. Red's the color of passion, of course. That's what I was missing in my life. Blue's so cold. So you sell your car, you sell your suits, you get a red watch, and all of a sudden now, everything's red. 6 months later, how do you feel? Instead of spending their lifetime, which most people do, stirring the stuff in the glass, which is never going to fit the pictures ultimately of what you want to think. What happens if I was to change that bottle, the color of the plastic, to blue or red? What would immediately appear to happen from the outside perspective? I see everything in a different color. See, if something's not going well, by design, rather than try to stir the stuff in the glass, try to change everything, the key to wanting to live a more empowering, fulfilling, creative life is to change the context, not the content. Hence, 2 men sat behind prison bars. So if you're in a relationship and somebody leaves you, you can say, oh God, I'm so lonely, I'm no good, they left me, and you try to find another relationship. Or you say, well, thank God they left, so they made room for somebody who's right. Now, those two paths moving forward, 12 months, lead to 2 very different experiences, do they not? Same relationship breakup. It's not changing what's in the glass, it's changing how you hold what's in the glass. So when things show up that don't fit your pictures, as they will, as I said, your non-physical support team are constantly trying to help you by engineering scenarios in the outer world that cause you to grow. If you're rowing down across the Atlantic of life, there's obviously going to be waves and storms. But if you're due to pick up some treasure at the end, that's where you want to go. Let's just say that treasure's so heavy that your current biceps aren't able to lift it. So what does the friendly universe do? It sends you a storm to row through to build up your arms. Now, if you're aware of that from that context, same storm, same waves, different relationship to it, you're not thrown off the horse when the storms show up. It's bring it on. Follow? That's how you walk into prison smiling. Don't try that. It's not an endorsement. Somebody else? Yeah. Next one, then we've got a few at the back and a few over here as well. Yeah.
Well, yeah, quick question, actually.
Sure.
At first you were saying like all of us will understand and like we will get the talk, but not a lot of us will actually follow up or actually like put it into action. So my question is like, how do we make sure everything you showed us today, which obviously inspired me, like what would be like some habits or something more tangible where I'm like, okay, like I love like challenging myself, like journaling. I don't know if you have any tangible like aspects to it.
Like standing upside down in an ice bath for 5 minutes, that kind of thing.
Throwing myself out of a plane. But like...
And I appreciate the question. And if you'll permit me, a lot of that comes from the need for certainty. A lot of that comes from saying, okay, what do I have to do in order to be? Which is the wrong question to ask. You see, what I was alluding to earlier was the fact if you have an intellectual understanding of what I say, how many of us all been to a talk, especially at school or college, it was just freaking boring. You can't remember a damn thing, or you hear a speaker, a keynote, and this was a lesson I learned many years ago. I went to see one of the Toastmasters silver medalist, and I wanted to be a speaker. This is 25 years ago. And I was a speaker, but I wanted to get better, so I go to learn from people that have done well. And the guy's passed away now, but I won't use his name, his surname. His first name was Philip. And he got on stage, and if he was giving a masterclass on public speaking, he would have got a distinction. 45-minute keynote, finished at 45-minute dead. The use of stage presence, spatial anchoring, tonality, the pause, first class. I mean, off the charts. Could I remember a damn thing he said 3 weeks later? No. How many of you got a sense that you might remember some of the things I said here today for quite a while? Right? See, the ability to move people emotionally to take action. I could give you a checklist, and the next person you listen to with their checklist, because yours still isn't working because you haven't made the internal shifts, you're going to move to the next checklist. or the next PhD or the next millionaire advice or whatever it is. What I wanted to say today was something that could help move you emotionally to take action, because if you do it from that place, it doesn't matter what your routine is. What I wanted to do today was help you shift internally, not give you a technique or a checklist. You will find your checklist that works for you if you're feeling it from the right place. Does that help?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, yeah. Let's go over here. We got these guys, their hands up for ages, and then we'll go further back. And guys, I'm here till midnight, so it's all good.
Hi, thank you so much. It's really been very inspiring. But one question I wanted to ask you. You said that there is extras and there is supporters. What happened in your life when the supporters become extras? How do you move from there? How you accept that and continue, especially if it's business involvement as well, or they are in your industry, or some people that they really help you to be where you are now?
No, understood.
Yeah.
The overarching key is one thing. Make sure that no matter what happens, because people come into your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. We don't control that. The only thing we can control is to make sure that from our perspective, we remain the star of our movie. So you are going to have people come in and out, and you can thank them for the role that they play. This is why I love the movie analogy, because if you go to Hollywood, and let's say I'm Daniel Craig, I know he's better looking, but just pretend for now, and I'm on set, there are people in that movie who are going to finish their involvement with the movie before I finish the involvement with the movie, correct? And I'm going to be grateful for the role that they played, even if it was the stunt guy that I blew up on the roof. But at some point, I have to remain true to me being the star of my movie. I came here to film my film. Now, that's not an egocentric thing, that's a reality check. Doesn't mean to say that you're not compassionate, you're not empathetic. Doesn't say your value structure says that I'm too significant for you and I'm a prima donna on set. That's not the game. One of my best students, very good friends with Keanu Reeves. Keanu Reeves is one of the most humble people you'll see on set. He goes around, speaks to everybody. He bought some of the security team motorbikes out of his check one time. One of my other very good friends is the adopted son of Will Smith, and tells me stories about how humble Will is on set, to take time to speak to the people behind the sets that's washing the dishes and all of that kind of stuff. It doesn't mean to say that he's like, I'm better than you because I'm the star of my movie. No, there's a different level of emotional maturity there. But if somebody comes in and then goes out of your life for an ex-business partner, we've all had, and if you haven't, you probably will, ex-business partners, right? Then you can honor them for the role they played, but don't compromise your role in your movie for reminiscing about a relationship that served its purpose at that time, even if you had better plans for it. I don't know if that helped answer the question.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. Thank you.
First of all, thank you very much for your words. It's been very inspiring.
You're welcome.
My question goes a little bit around personal growth, and I want to get your opinion on which role do you think introspection plays in personal growth, and do you recommend it or not?
The question, if I rephrase it, it might help with the answer.
Okay.
When it comes to starring in my movie and trying to be a better actor, should I rely on other people's opinions and stuff externally, or should I actually figure out what role I should walk my truth with? See, introspection is something that most people don't do because, as Henry Thoreau said, the hardest thing a human being can do is to think. Most people fear it more than death itself, end quote. So the only thing that it means anything in your movie is to you. So why not have the conversation with you to see what you can learn rather than distract yourself out there catching more rabbits that ultimately aren't going to lead to fulfillment. So introspection as a habit is excellent. I mean, my morning routine consists of connecting at a low alpha state, journaling. Journaling is a great way to self-reflect, as long as you're honest with yourself. That's why nobody reads my journal. Why? Because if I thought somebody else was going to read it, there may be an unconscious shift to how I was going to phrase it. So it's the one place I can be honest with me, in writing. So introspection is key, otherwise you're going to have to learn the same lessons over and over again, most likely, because you're too busy out there trying to chase the next rabbit to actually realize why you didn't catch the last one. Does that help?
Yeah.
Cool.
Thanks.
All the way at the back. A hand for our mic runners, ladies and gentlemen.
First and foremost, thank you. Super inspiring. I just want to kind of share what I'm going through in terms of like what I'm with the kombucha. I've always been, I've always trusted the universe wholeheartedly, maybe stupidly at times, maybe the people that I've had around me, trusting that they do the job. So the whole experience, I was the first to do an industrial scale production of kombucha here in Barcelona back in 2017. And then it's been such chaos until this year that I'm currently finding myself in a state where I'm super grateful because I've got finally an amazing team who are accountable, an amazing operations manager. I've dedicated my life to having a perfectly imperfect product because I don't believe in perfection, as you said. But now I'm currently feeling totally lost in my role as a company, and I don't know what to do because, I was literally that from closing it last year just because the failure of like people stepping up to the plate and performing. I trust a lot in people because I trust myself and I am a hard worker. But now I'm feeling totally lost in my role as a founder and visionary because the chaos is no longer there. Like, how do I navigate that now? Because I feel totally lost.
Great question.
No way.
Sure. Great. Yeah. Great. And great product, by the way.
Thank you.
So I talked about patterns earlier. One of the patterns that I ran a lot in my 20s was that as an entrepreneur, I defined myself by going against the odds. I would almost purposely self-sabotage just so that I could pull the rabbit out of the hat at the last minute to feel good about the fact that I was good enough. And that I noticed when I started understanding a little bit more about introspection and human behavior, that I was actually doing that unconsciously on purpose. Because I would validate my significance by, you say it can't be done, watch me. Yeah, 1,000,000 to 1, I like the odds. So when things was going normal, I would purposely screw something up. It's like, guys, you ever been in a relationship where it's all going great, but your partner likes variety, so they're going to have an argument just to try and get some spice, right? That's similar kind of deal. Don't make it about the argument. Make it about bringing some variety to the relationship. So it's the same here. Ask yourself, what pattern is running? Why do I define myself through the chaos? What part of that allows me to feel significant or gives me purpose that I'm not finding when it's calm waters? Because what you may find is when you focus on the fact that you've got calm waters, rather than do what unconscious pattern says, which is let's go screw something up or hire some idiot so that I go close to bankruptcy again and pull it out of the bag, I can actually free up that energy of managing chaos to put into the original vision and passion I have for the business or build it to another level or go add value. But don't be hooked in terms of this no man's land, because now what I've been used to doing, which is saving everything from the brink of disaster, is no longer there. What the hell do I do next? All right. Oh, I look for my next war zone? No, you build on top of the rubble, something that's more meaningful. Because the reality is, you've got nothing to defend, nothing to conquer, and nothing to prove. And of course, I'm only talking to you and nobody else in this room. And when you let go of the need for that, and you free up that energy, you can get in touch with that little spark that you had when you first came up with the idea, when you first heard the word, Kambu what?
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I would like to know, how do you treat with these people, teammates, partners, that they think they are doing so much for the company, but they are not, in fact. So you go like in
Lazy
shark mode.
bastards.
Yeah, because I'm in this situation right now with one of my partners, and it's like a huge difference in terms of work and deal effort. So I would like to know what you do and how do you try to treat with this kind of
It's a
people.
great question, and I think we all have battle scars around this at some level. So I'll share with you my answer. I remember a while back, somewhere in the 90s, I was spending so much money on printing, I decided to set up my own printing company. I went and bought a 5-color Heidelberg press, like the one at the end of Catch Me If You Can, where it's a whole room, one of these. Now, I don't know anything about printing. I know about business. So I hired a guy, we went into partnership, I put up all the money, and he's good at putting ink on paper. But eventually, he started resenting it because he's doing all the work, but he wouldn't be having any work if I hadn't wrote a check for $250,000 and bought the damn machine. You get there. So one of the first lessons to understand here is that is always going to happen because everybody does what they think is right. The biggest problem is, and you may have suffered from this at some point, anyone? Yeah, put your hand up. Have you ever expected you from somebody else? How's that working for you? Yeah, right? So, but when it's in business, I have 3 rules. And I say 3 rules because I just broke the damn rules last year by getting involved in somebody else that I didn't follow these rules with, and it's just bit me in the ass for $250,000. And the first rule is alignment of vision. Do you both want the same thing? Because it's easy to see at the end of the road that you both want to go there. But what's 5 years down the road? Because if that is different, I was coaching a couple of girls way back that met in college. They set up a fashion business, and for the first 2 years it was amazing, and then they started fighting and bickering, and they didn't want to. They were friends, but it was just sticky. And they hired me. I came in, and the first thing I did was say, write out what is your vision for this business, ultimately. Get a picture of what it looks like when it's finally done. That's a Tom Watson quote, IBM. Get a picture of the business of what it looks like when it's finally done. And they both wrote, and they went to hand me the page. Took them about 10, 15 minutes to write this thing down. I said, don't give it me, give it each other. And they swapped pages, and you could see the mouths open. So, well, I didn't know you wanted that. See, one of them wanted to be this boutique cottage industry for ladies' fashion. The other one wanted to be on the Paris, Milan catwalks. And when you're first starting up, you know what the next 6 months look like. I've got to get clients and revenue and prototypes and minimum viable products and all of that stuff. So there's always agreement there, but what is the alignment of vision? Second thing, alignment of values. If you don't have that conversation to start with, then you're going to get in trouble, because if you value significance more than, let's say, authenticity, and somebody else values authenticity more than significance, one's going to want to cut corners to make them look good, and the other one say, no, I'm going to compromise that. I had that. I built one of the largest nutraceutical companies in the early 2000s in Europe called the Worldwide Health Corporation. I chose it because it sounded like the World Health Organization. But I pioneered DHEA, melatonin, pregnenolone, MSM, colloidal minerals. I pioneered all of that into Europe, and we were doing, 30,000 customers on a monthly repeat order. And then my business partner wanted to get into red yeast rice, because the studies were showing that next to Google lipids, which is another natural product, red yeast rice lowers cholesterol naturally. And I said no. He said it's $1 million opportunity. I'm like, I don't believe the cholesterol hoax. The cholesterol hoax is a fucking hoax. There has never been a study that has proven cholesterol leads to heart disease. Sorry, it's a way to sell statins, and you've been manipulated by data, and I can prove it every step of the way. So he wanted to make money by selling a product I didn't believe in because he saw the opportunity. And I'm like, no fucking way. I don't care if it makes me $1 billion. I'm not doing it because it's not who I am, and I'll never sell my values for cash. If we'd have had that conversation to begin with, we wouldn't have got into business to start with. Different values. So alignment of values, alignment of vision, alignment of values, and then the third one, no gray areas. And no gray areas means that you need to have a permission frame with each other to say, hey, listen, I'm a great believer if two people in business always agree, one of them's unnecessary. So we are going to disagree at some point. That's good, because I don't want to go into business with a yes man or a yes woman. So at some point we're going to clash, and especially if we're co-founders 50-50, we need to have a method of resolution that allows us to say, hey, listen, I don't believe this, you don't believe that. Let's sit down, and when we walk out of the room, whatever we agree, even if it's agree to disagree, we have a frame where we can actually discuss rather than me start resenting you because I'm doing all the freaking work. Yeah, I was the one on one of my businesses that was arriving at the office at 6 a.m., that was leaving at freaking 2 a.m., and one of my partners would get in at 10 o'clock in the morning, tell the girls to go make him 3 different cups of tea, right, do everything else. And I'm like, the reason this business is successful is because I've got my thumb out of my ass and you haven't. But we didn't have a framework for that. So learning how to have the conversation, and eventually I went to my partner, we were 50-50, I said, hey, listen, I really feel that from an activity, commitment, all of that stuff, risk-taking, finance, I'm doing more than 50%. And I would like to renegotiate our shares 60-40. And even though I felt I was doing 80% of the work, I felt that at least I'd feel I was getting slightly more for my effort. He kicked back. He's like, no fucking way. Says, I don't believe you think that. If it wasn't for me with the original idea, you wouldn't be doing this, blah, 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 blah. And so you're always going to see things from different points of view. Eventually, I'm like, well, in that case, I'm walking away. The staff will follow me. I'm the one that's doing everything. Enjoy your 100% of nothing. And he knew he couldn't build the business without me because he'd never have to get in the office at 10 a.m. He'd have to get his ass about. So he eventually says, okay, but it was a forced, reluctant okay, and the relationship was never the same after that. So having if you're already in business, and it's a bit late for the vision and values conversation, although you can always revisit, but just having that level of, hey, listen, I'm starting to feel as if I'm pulling more of the weight. I don't want to feel like that because I love you as a friend, I respect you as a business guy, so here's how I'm feeling, because if he's not aware, he's going to think it comes out of the blue when you explode and think, what the fuck? If he's not open to the conversation, at least you're finding out now, not just before you IPO. Make sense? Best I could give you.
Thank you.
Welcome.